As a child, Soyul was rescued from a dungeon by a legendary explorer. From that day on, he dedicated his life to saving others the same way he had once been saved. But during one rescue mission, he became the one trapped with no way out. On the brink of death, he awakened a hidden class unlike anything the world had ever seen. Labyrinth Designer. Now, instead of conquering dungeons, he can create and control them himself. Can the man who once rescued people from labyrinths become the one who rewrites the rules of every dungeon? Right now, a rescue squad was driving through the city at night and watching the news. Today, South Korean hunters who attempted to pass the 6-digit level gate failed again. In this regard, the public is expressing concern about the upcoming international raid competition next year, and fears and anxiety are growing. The guy noted that the rivalry with Japan is now a thing of the past, and his colleague added, "Still, they rake in much more money than them, so it's incredible." Their boss, Lee Han, asked, "And still, they should have faith in the newcomers, right?" He turned to Yul and asked what he thought. Soyul is the main character and the deputy head of the rescue department. He turned off the news and said, "Let the hunters deal with it themselves, and they need to focus on the emergency call they are currently on their way to." Lee Han noted that he just said that in passing. Why is he so angry? Their colleague noted that all guild hunters are the same anyway, and they are always the ones to blame. The typical lamentations of civil servants. That's their current situation. The Management Bureau is an organization composed primarily of mid-level awakened beings. It includes the Vanguard, the Supervision, and the Rescue Department. Within this organization, when an anomaly occurs in the gate as a Rescue Department hunter, protecting other hunters and civilians, Yul's main specialty is as a seeker. He searches for the optimal rescue route. They soon arrived at the location. Before entering the portal, Lee Han told everyone to listen carefully. They were entering the gate to rescue members of the Epic Guild, so there was no time to relax. A man approached them and remarked on how hard their rescuers were working. MC immediately gave him a displeased look and wondered if he even had the nerve to talk to him. He was the leader of a large guild, Overcross, Baek Junwan. A petty old man, the culprit behind numerous emergency call incidents, recklessly sends weak partner guilds into the gate and only takes money, no matter whether people die or not. He chose not to speak to him, citing an emergency and that they needed to go. And this old man said the guild could offer them help. Didn't they really need that? Yul practically cursed. The current incident was his fault, and he wanted to maintain his guild's reputation even in this situation. He replied that they were doing their own work, so they didn't need help. Junwan remarked that this was quite sad, and then they walked toward the portal, the old man watching them thoughtfully. The gate was a lost ruin in the middle of the jungle. Right now, one of the surviving hunters was healing her comrade and telling him they'd sent an emergency request, so rescue would come soon, so he shouldn't even think about dying. But monsters had already crept up on them, grabbed her comrade, and then pounced on her. Seeing a huge paw above her, she screamed in fear, and just as she was preparing to die, a rescue squad arrived. MC decapitated the monster with a spear, then extended his hand to the shocked girl and asked if she was okay. The rescue squad arrived to help. He helped her up, and the boss called him, saying that the ghouls were coming like crazy from the direction they came from. Tell him to find another escape route so they could get out of here quickly. Yul used the silent wave skill. He needed to focus on the sounds, understand the dungeon structure, and find another way to the exit. He succeeded in doing this. Not far from here, if you go down one level and cross the bridge, you can reach the doors. He immediately called out to the boss and said that he had found a way, and now they needed to leave. The man, as always, praised him for his excellent skills, then threw the girl over his shoulder, and they broke into a run. She glanced at the monsters behind her and asked in disbelief, "Is this really the right way?" Lee Han answered her that although they were a D-rank seeker and hunter, his abilities were among the best in the country, so she had nothing to worry about. He suddenly turned sharply and, having killed one of the ghouls pursuing them, noted that he had said this so proudly, but he also wasn't sure if this was the right way. The ghouls were becoming more and more numerous here. They entered the battle. The girl they had saved supported them with healing spells in every possible way, and MC, having killed another monster, thought that this path definitely led to the exit. But these creatures knew about it too. Ghouls aren't exactly the smartest monsters, but it's a whole different story when they're controlled by a necromancer. His sixth sense constantly tells him that someone is watching them, and it's been going on for some time, meaning there's definitely someone nearby who's controlling the monsters. There was a loud thud of a wooden staff hitting the stone floor. A magic circle lit up under their feet, and Yul exclaimed that it was magic and they needed to get out of here immediately. They broke into a run, and the necromancer waved his fingers and did something. Lee Han started to slow down, telling Yul not to worry about him and to run ahead, and then he simply kicked him without further ado, pushing him out of the circle and trapping himself. The magic circle immediately activated, limiting his movement speed, and Lee Han worriedly told him to wait. He would definitely get him out of there. But MC sternly told him not to come any closer. If he didn't leave now, everyone would die. He needed to get the others out of here quickly. Lee Han glanced at his men. They were fighting the monsters with all their might, and the decision hadn't been easy. He apologized to Yule and went to the hunters, who smirked and told him not to bury him prematurely. He had no intention of dying. He was surrounded by monsters, and he turned directly to the necromancer and asked, he'd planned to play with them all along, hadn't he? It was Karakul, the boss of this dungeon. He confirmed it. That was exactly what he wanted, but he was a little surprised at how skillfully he'd managed to escape. How did he know the temple's layout as well as he did? He smirked and said that if he let him live, maybe he'd tell him about it. Karakul didn't spare him and said, sure, he just needs to turn him into a ghoul, and then he'll find out everything. His body began to slowly become infected and covered in black mold. The system notified him that he was cursed. His life force was rapidly declining. Feeling the pain, he screamed loudly and thought, was this meaningless nonsense? If he had honestly asked for help, he might have been able to get out of here alive. But he can't do that. Guild hunters who chase money instead of saving people. In reality, which is full of such mercantile idiots, he was once saved by a real hero. That hunter stroked his head and cried because he couldn't save everyone, and he wanted to become a hunter who protects the weak, like that hero from the Control Bureau. That's why he can't die here. He gathered his strength, activated all his skills, and sparks emanated from his body throughout the temple. He tried to find at least something, even the slightest opportunity, anything to survive. And then a destroyed monument caught his eye. It was the only one glowing here. Putting it all together, he discovered information regarding a hidden class, something he certainly didn't expect to find here. Karakul said he was resisting very strongly, so he would ease his suffering right now. At his command, the ghouls rushed to attack, and the system offered him to change his class to the hidden Labyrinth Designer class. He hesitated. The monsters were already very close, and he understood that it wouldn't make things worse. He would either die or take a new class. He shouted at the top of his lungs that he agreed, and the system said he accepted the class change quest. Cracks spread from his body throughout the temple, after which the training began. A wall of many blocks and different materials appeared in front of him. Karakul cursed and asked in shock, what the hell is going on here? Where did that guy disappear to? There was only that wall of blocks in front of him, while MC teleported him to the training area. He glanced at his status window. His previous class, Seeker, had simply disappeared. He wondered in surprise, had he really awakened again? If so, this place must be a training area. A task window appeared in front of him. He needed to use the map function to destroy 20 ghouls that had infiltrated the labyrinth within 24 hours. As a reward, he would be given the opportunity to change his class to Labyrinth Designer, and the destroyed ghouls would become part of this place. The rest was clear, but what did the map function mean? A hologram of the labyrinth immediately appeared in front of him. Surprisingly simple and clear. Green was Yule's location, and red must have marked the location of the ghouls. He got the idea. He needed to use this map to track down the monsters in one day. It seemed absurd in some ways, but for him, a seeker, it was worth a try. He took a deep breath and then set off to complete the task with a confident smile. Time passed, he finished off the ghoul, and the system notified him of a level up. There were 4 monsters left, and time was running out. 30 minutes left. MC thought he needed to deal with them quickly. The training had gone smoothly. Even better than he thought. He even managed to get a weapon from the monster right away. After that, he used his skills to gradually whittle down their numbers, and if things continued like this, he would finish the time limit. He was confident of this until he noticed one of the monsters starting to chase him. But it didn't show itself to him. It was simply standing behind the wall. It was probably a good thing it kept to itself, unlike the other ghouls, but it was unknown how long it would take to finish it off. And would he even be able to do it? Still, if he had to kill it, he needed to deal with the others quickly to buy himself some time. He heard quick footsteps behind him, turned around and saw a ghoul approaching him, and said that it scared him. But he was grateful to him that he came here to die alone. But he was not alone, but with the guy who was following him and others. He smirked and called him a cunning idiot. He doesn't know about the others, but he didn't expect him to join the pack. And since when did he start following him? Just think, it was worth him getting distracted for a moment and not checking the map because of the rush, and everything turned into the worst possible scenario. But he needs to calm down and urgently reconsider the plan. First of all, the maximum number of ghouls he can handle at a time is 2. That means he needs to get out of here. The problem is that he is surrounded, so he will have to break out by fighting. But no matter how much he thought about this situation, he knew that he was trapped, and he'd hoped he could handle it. Is this really the limit for a D-rank hunter? No. This situation was bad from the start. It was just training to become a labyrinth designer, so let it act like training. At least it'll give him something. He screamed in rage. Did they really think he'd come all this way just to die like that? He activated his skills, prepared for battle, and the system said, block rotation detected, thanks to the connection between the Sixth Sense skill and the map. He can now use block rotation via hologram. A map appeared next to him. The system marked which wall could be rotated in green, and he tried it. At that moment, the monsters pounced on him, but the wall turned and blocked him from them. He found himself alone with the monster and immediately finished it off. Now he understood how to use this class. Hunting would be much easier. After that, a series of labyrinth reconstruction and monster slayings began. Thanks to his new ability, he easily dealt with each of them, and only one monster remained, the one that had been watching him all this time. He pounced on him from behind, plunging his weapon into his neck, and then he grabbed Yule by the head and squeezed, but Yule was stronger and said, "He told him so." Did he really think he had come all this way just to die? He swung his weapon, decapitating him, and the system informed him that the training was complete. He had successfully changed his class to Labyrinth Designer. As a reward, he received an exclusive skill. Goals defeated while activating the Sphere skill will be included in the labyrinths as monsters. The training is over. He wishes to return to safety. Meanwhile, Li Han struggled to enter the gate, but his subordinates held him tightly in place. And one of them said, "He understands everything, but they just need to go back and think it over." He exclaimed in response that they should save him right now, and the guy reminded him that the gate suddenly disappeared. So where is he going to look for Yule? But he found them himself. He had already gone to the store for some snacks and returned to them. He asked what they were making such a fuss about, and they stared at him in shock. After which he showed them a bag of food and suggested they just buy some ice cream and go home quickly. After that day, MC began to understand his skills. He went to the park and tested his first skill, the sphere. It allows him to imprison enemies in the labyrinth. Apparently, he will often use it outside the labyrinth. He can also enter the labyrinth through this sphere. However, he needs to be careful. Enemies who manage to leave the labyrinth after defeating the boss will become even stronger. This means that he can't just mindlessly imprison enemies there. Since the sphere is invisible to others, trapping them in the labyrinth will be easy, but to survive against the strong enemies he will meet in the future, he needs to strengthen the labyrinth with more and stronger monsters. Of course, the only way to replenish the labyrinth with monsters is to kill enemies inside the labyrinth and activate the King of the Labyrinth skill. So ultimately, he himself needs to become stronger. Suddenly, a schoolgirl approached him and asked what he was thinking about here alone. It was Yunhee. She handed him a bag of apples, and he asked if she was returning from the boss's store. She confirmed it. Her mother asked her to give them to him, and she just met him here. He looked into the bag in surprise and asked if he could really take that many apples. She told him that they always had plenty of extra fruit at home anyway. Besides, it was just the neighbor's concern for the past 5 years. They walked home together, and he asked how she was doing at school. Was she handling everything? She flinched at the unexpected question, and hesitantly answered that everything was fine at school, as always. He gave her a thoughtful look, after which a frightened woman's voice was heard nearby. She was trying to force her way past the police into the hotel, screaming that her daughter Somi was still there, that she was still in the hotel room. Yunhee looked around the building and noted that it didn't look like a fire. It was a breach, a phenomenon in which monsters break out of gates if they've been left unattended for a long time. Yule gave Yunhee a bag and asked if he could pick up the apples later. She agreed without any problem and asked why so suddenly, to which he replied, he needs to go to the rescue department. Work is waiting. While the police were detaining people, MC simply walked through the fence, and a man immediately ran up to him, saying that he can't go in there alone. He showed him his ID, and he asked why he was here alone. He told him that the rest of the rescue department would be here soon, but he would go in first. The policeman excitedly grabbed his shoulder and exclaimed that he still couldn't go in there. There was a flock of red goblins inside the hotel right now, so it would definitely be dangerous for him to be there alone. Yule said that was exactly why he needed to get in there as soon as possible. The woman was screaming that her child was still inside the hotel, and the guild hunters who were supposed to arrive first were still nowhere to be seen, so he should at least go in. The policeman was worried. Still, he didn't want to let him in there alone, but he assured him that everything would be fine, because he wasn't alone there to begin with. Usually, the gates in this hotel were supposed to be cleared by the guild in charge of this area, an organization called the Hanol Guild. People live their lives, believing that guilds will take care of everything, but by their nature, they don't care about gates that don't bring in money. Because of this, low-ranking gates periodically experience breaches, which leads to tragedies like this. As soon as he entered the building, he saw a pile of bodies in the lobby. He activated his sixth sense and told the goblins to stop spying on him and go out. He just wanted to check something. The goblins immediately made themselves known and attacked him from all sides, and he noted with a smirk, this is exactly how they should behave. He created a sphere. It acted like a black hole, sucking in the goblins before collapsing. MC peered into the labyrinth and thought that if he were his old self, he would have hesitated before entering, but he is the current one, the master of this labyrinth, so everything is just beginning. Some time passed, he climbed several floors, and right now a ghoul was chasing a goblin in the labyrinth. Red goblins are a species that stick around their leader, and in all respects they are quite different from regular goblins. However, if there is one difference, it's that they hunt intelligently. The goblin fleeing from the monster was actually only pretending to run in fear, but the monster was luring it into a trap. As soon as the monster was in position, 2 more goblins pounced on it from above, but Yule decided to stop them. He flipped the wall, causing the 2 goblins to crash into it and be cut off from the ghoul. MC asked if they were trying to pull dirty tricks while he wasn't looking, so they're starting to get used to the maze too. It's good that the ghouls are hunting him themselves, but the number of goblins drawn into the labyrinth has increased. He will have to keep a close eye on everything as he moves on. They can continue to play their dirty tricks, because inside the labyrinth, they will be the ones being hunted anyway. He went up to the 17th floor, checked all the rooms, and finally found a girl named Somi sitting in the closet. He told her with a smile that she no longer had to worry about anything. He would take care of everything. After that, he led her out of the room and she, carefully looking around, asked if he really dealt with all the goblins himself. He confirmed it and thought, it's not that he dealt with them, he just threw them into the labyrinth. Throwing them there was a good move. While he was going up here, the goblins were constantly searching for hiding people by smell, so if he hadn't gone up quickly, they would have found Somi in a flash. A system alert popped up. More than 50% of the monsters guarding the labyrinth had been destroyed. He called the elevator and told the girl that everything was working now, so she could go down. She got into the elevator and asked if he would come with her. He waved at her with a smile and told her that he needed to catch the last bad guy. He went back and looked into the sphere. As he thought, that's who was destroying everyone here, the Red Goblin King, so he'll kill all his ghouls. Maybe he should pit him against the labyrinth boss before there were even fewer ghouls? No, if the boss suddenly lost, it would create unnecessary problems. Besides, he still needed to check something inside, so maybe he should go in himself? Stepping into the labyrinth, he was even surprised. Those dead ghouls looked impressive in person. He really had blown them to smithereens. He turned the wall, pushing the goblin towards him, and immediately drew his weapon. The goblin grew furious and vowed to kill him. He launched a powerful blow, and Yule only had to duck to dodge, followed by a series of attacks. After dodging each blow, Yule noticed that his body felt light despite his fatigue. This was the level he had reached by becoming a labyrinth designer. He definitely felt that everything had changed. Initially, he had planned to just test the situation and use ghouls, but he could handle it himself. He dodged the attack and struck back, piercing both of his arms. The goblin jerked them sharply in different directions, breaking the spear, then punched Yule and threw him aside. He blocked the blow and landed successfully, after which he thanked him for deliberately throwing him right here. But now he could at least swing his sword? He shook his hand and thought that the position was also perfect, so he might as well test that too. He asked with a smirk what he was doing. Where had all that old enthusiasm gone? He had invested 2 million won in it, but if it was already exhausted, that was a problem. Since he was the king of the pack, he had to show off accordingly. He feigned surprise and asked if maybe he was afraid of him. This taunting angered the goblin, who immediately rushed towards him, shouting that he would kill him. MC said that he had to show that his investment had not been in vain, because he really wanted to see that with his help. The goblin grew even more heated, and chains rattled from above. It was the rejection device necessary for the labyrinth. The goblin was already very close to him. He raised his weapon, and Yule said goodbye with a smirk. The spike ceiling trap was activated, and a huge, jagged slab fell on the goblin. After that, the chains tightened, and the slab began to slowly rise back up, revealing to Yule what had become of the monster. The setup cost him a whopping 20 gold. But the traps were definitely worth the investment. Plus, the results were guaranteed. After killing the monster, his level increased, and thanks to the activation of the King of the Labyrinth skill, the defeated flock of red goblins would be included in the labyrinth. Soon, he left the hotel, and Li Han immediately called out to him loudly and angrily, causing him to flinch. Menacingly, he approached him and exclaimed, "Does he even know how long he's been waiting for him? What the hell was he doing here? Wandering around by himself?" He patted him on the head with great emotion and exclaimed, "Is it true that he dealt with all the red goblins himself?" He played dumb and told him that he didn't remember anything at all after hitting his head. Li Han called him a little brat and asked why he always said he didn't remember anything lately. Everyone was saying the goblins disappeared right after he walked in. The MC said he might remember something if he treated him to some beef, and Li Han irritably remarked that he'd just gotten better at talking. A man approached them and apologized for interrupting their conversation. He introduced himself. His name was Kwon Seong-soo, a department head representing the Hanul Guild. Could he talk to them for a few minutes? Li Han agreed, and the man bowed to them, saying that first of all, he wanted to sincerely thank them for their assistance in fixing the breach. He decided to cut to the chase and address them both, saying that they would prefer that they refrain from giving interviews to reporters regarding this incident if possible. Their guild did not want this matter to become public. Of course, they'll compensate for the damage to the hotel, but if bad rumors spread about them, wouldn't that just make the residents even more nervous? Naturally, they'll also be generous with their funding for the management bureau, so he'd appreciate their understanding as fellow hunters. Yule frowned, so that's how they keep people quiet. Well, he had a point. Unlike the hunters from the Management Bureau, who are mostly D-rank hunters, guild hunters have a wide range of powers, all the way up to S-rank. As a result, people trust guild hunters, who possess great power, more and believe that they will protect them. Guilds exploiting this trust infuriated him, but he considered it a reality he couldn't do anything about on his own. He clapped the man on the shoulder and said that as a fellow hunter, he understood him perfectly. He smiled and thought he didn't intend to make a big deal out of it from the start. Even if he made a big deal out of it, the incident would be quickly hushed up as soon as the Hunters Association got involved, and he himself shouldn't draw unnecessary attention to himself. Of course, it would be unfair to him if everything ended like that. He started patting him on the shoulder and said he didn't know exactly what sponsorship amount he had in mind, considering he would still have to clean up the mess left by the guild hunters. Since he was clapping him quite hard, he asked him to stop, and then he stopped and named the amount of 100 billion won and said he hopes he can sponsor them with this amount. They need a lot. They can do it, right? The man was shocked. It was a huge amount. A new day had dawned. MC went out to the park for a walk and was now enjoying his coffee. After he dealt with the breakthrough at the hotel, he was given 2 days off. He handled everything single-handedly and even shook some money down from the guild, so it's a well-deserved reward. The problem is, his colleagues look at him strangely. They find it hard to believe he did it all alone. They don't need to know for now. If word gets out about his reawakening, it could become very tiring. He'll be constantly pestered with interviews, and all that extra attention is just unnecessary. So for now, he's decided to focus on managing the labyrinth. First, he needs to restore the destroyed labyrinth walls and monster spawn points using currency. But it's not just repairs that cost money. Gold is also taken from monster spawns, depending on their strength. The stronger they are, the more expensive they are. The unit of currency, gold, is the common currency for all hunters. There's no separate currency for the labyrinth, which simplifies the calculations. The problem is, it's insanely expensive. The total cost of repairs is 53 gold, which is 5.3 million won, almost twice his monthly salary. But since he'd already accumulated 80 gold by now, it was worth making such an investment. He was about to move on to the next case, but his friend called him. He immediately didn't like that she'd called him on his day off, and told her to tell him what she needed right away. She exclaimed that he was at the park anyway. In any case, it was good that he was on vacation. He would have plenty of time to use his seeker skills. He could find someone for her right now, right? This girl was Lee Jong-hee from the monitoring department. She was silent for a few seconds, waiting for an answer, then decided to look at the screen. It turned out it had simply hung up silently, which angered her. Meanwhile, he threw away his coffee cup and moved on, thinking that he didn't have to resurrect all the monsters in the labyrinth at once. This way, he could save gold, and if necessary, he could intervene himself. It would be faster that way. Jong-hee called him again. At first, he tried to ignore it, but the sound was starting to annoy him. He shouted into the phone that since she was from the monitoring department, she should look for it herself, and she tearfully asked him for help, promising to treat him to beef. A beautiful and fragile lady asking him nicely. He repeated doubtfully, "Beautiful and fragile?" She said, "Besides, when he finds out who it is, he will want to find them first. It's Kang Tae-sun." Hearing this name, he froze and said that he would definitely like to see him at least once. After all, if it was someone of such caliber, he would find them in a jiffy. He went to the old men playing board games and began to watch. One of them told his opponent that it was a bad move, and he furiously called him an old fart and invited him to play Go, which he was not at all against. Yule glanced at the old man and thought he could feel it from afar, but up close, it was even more incredible. That dark red aura, the kind only powerful awakened ones possess. With that aura, he stands out even from afar. But aside from the aura, is it really him? He's so different from the image he had in his head. He looks like an ordinary Highlander. The old man turned to him and remarked that he'd been watching for quite some time. Does he know how to play Changji? He replied that he knew the rules a little, and he whispered to him to tell him how he should play to beat this old man. He suggested he move the rook, and suddenly his sixth sense activated, and he quickly dodged the game piece flying at him, which crashed into the tree behind him with a crash. The surprised old men immediately began taking pictures, and the old man said in a rage, he can turn a blind eye to the fact that someone is approaching him with ulterior motives. The MC glanced at him nervously and realized his fears were unfounded. It was definitely him, one of only 5 S-rank hunters in Korea, a hunter said to be able to turn any object into a deadly weapon, Kang Tae-sun. The old man said he couldn't turn a blind eye to this useless advice. Jong-hee called out loudly to him. She must have run all the way here, which was why she was now so out of breath. Tae-sun glanced at her and asked Yule, so he's from the monitoring department? He smiled and showed him the phone screen with Jong-hee's call log and told him he was a seeker from the rescue department. He stroked his beard and remarked that he was too bold for a guide, to which he replied, having too many talents is a curse. Tae-sun said that if it weren't for his mouth, he would be fine. Having come to her senses, Jong-hee asked him what he was doing there. She had been looking for him everywhere. The trainees had already gathered, so they needed to return immediately. The old man followed her, and she turned to Yule with a smile, asking how he had found someone whom even the monitoring department hadn't been able to find. He told her that he was just so capable. In any case, his job was done, and he left. and let her not forget about the beef. Tae-san called him a little bastard and asked, where is he going? He was also a hunter from the bureau, so let him follow him. He wanted to see this insolent loudmouth for himself. They arrived at the bureau, and Tae-san began the lesson. Every awakened one has their own limit of capabilities. This means that a C-rank hunter will never be able to get out of C-rank, no matter how hard they try. However, the system can't determine everything, because martial arts cannot be completely contained in numbers, which means that one can become stronger through mastery of weapons. And that is why they, the hunters from the bureau, are here today. The MC was standing next to him on the stage, wanting to just go back and check the labyrinth. Tae-san pointed to the guy next to him and asked how long he'd been training him. He said loudly that he was on CU from the monitoring department and that today was exactly 4 months. One of the trainees asked if the senior was one of the few B-rank hunters in the monitoring department. Right? The guy sitting next to him confirmed it, and Tae-san told the guy he had potential, which was why he was here now. He thanked him, and then Tae-san decided to ask one question. What, in his opinion, was necessary to swing this sword properly? He answered that in his opinion, it required great strength and an understanding of the skills. Tae-san looked at Yul and asked his opinion on the matter, and he said, there's nothing to think about. He believes that you need willpower to swing a weapon. Some were indignant at his answer, and Tae-san himself noticed how casually he answered and asked if he was sure about that. He confirmed it and thought, as expected of an S-rank, he is smart. The old man remarked, his behavior, that shameless expression, he is really very impudent, but he is right. MC was even surprised and Ansu's gaze immediately became furious. How is it that the master praised this stranger and not him? He pointed his finger at him and exclaimed, how can this even be the right answer? He can't accept the fact that someone who is not even a trainee is even here. Yul thought, why did he get so worked up over one question? He is acting like a child. Tae-san said that anyone with sufficient qualifications can be here. This is different from the original plan, but he will give them both a test. This way they can prove their answers. Do they agree? And Siu of course agreed, and MC refused, and Tae-san said, then he has no choice but to choose this big young man, as planned. But is he really sure that he doesn't care? Even though passing his test meant he'd become his direct disciple, now that piqued his interest. This wasn't just a chance to become stronger, it was a chance to achieve a high position. Tae-san smirked, calling him a brat and asking if he now had any motivation. He thought for a moment, made up his mind, and confidently confirmed it. After that, the old man led them to a separate room and said, the test is extremely simple. Let them use the skills he imparted to them and smash the etheric stone in front of them as hard as they could. The one who wins will become his disciple. Yul thought about the etheric stone. It was a magical stone said to be found only in temples. He'd heard that only powerful awakened beings could smash it. But imparted skills, what did he mean? And Siu turned to the monitoring department and punched the air. They cheered him on and cried out joyfully. Meanwhile, Yul concentrated. There was no way he could pass up this chance. Tae-san warmed up and said he would now impart his skills to them. Of course, they should keep in mind that if they felt nothing, they would immediately fail the test. After that, he released his energy and the system immediately detected the aura of a weapons master. Under such pressure, Yul could barely breathe. To think that this was only possible thanks to the aura. Did he really have to endure this to acquire the skill? He felt like he was about to lose consciousness, but at the same time he could see it. This majestic spear in the darkness. The system notified him of the acquisition of the skill Tranquil Mind. He had mastered the art of the Dragon King's spear. Tae-san noted, judging by their faces, they both clearly had a predisposition. For now, at least they could be proud of that. Usually, people feel nothing at all and immediately lose consciousness. He stroked his beard with a smile and asked who would be the first to demonstrate their abilities. And Siu went first, approaching the ethereal stone with his sword and vowing to make Yul lose all desire to even challenge him. He's a master of talking nonsense. He suspected something was wrong from the moment he walked in with the old man. He doesn't know how a mere D-ranker managed to withstand the skill transfer, but in the end, he must be just a brat who bought his way here. All he has to do is prove his point by force. He swung his sword, breaking off a decent chunk of the stone, and the other students were surprised that the ethereal stone shattered so easily. Why is someone like him working as a hunter for the Bureau of Management? Tae-san wondered if he'd mastered the Dragon King's sword art. Not bad. And Siu walked back, bumped Yul's shoulder, and asked, where is he going? Did he decide to take the senior's place without even realizing his position? He responded with a smirk, asking how anyone could survive if they only looked back at others. The old man told them to put their squabbles aside and summoned Yul. He walked to the Aether Stone and thought he had answered because his tone infuriated him, but he was definitely stronger than him in terms of pure power. However, right now, this wasn't just a test of physical strength. This was a test meant to confirm his own answer. Besides, he said his answer was correct. The will to wield the weapon. It was true that he had answered inappropriately before, but that was precisely why it was his final answer. So, why was he holding the weapon? The answer had long been predetermined, to become like the man who saved him, and because he wanted many others to feel the same hope as he did. That's why he became a hunter from the Management Bureau, and to achieve this goal, he needs to become even stronger than he is now. He used the Dragon Flame Heart technique and lunged. Everyone was shocked by what happened with the ethereal stone, especially An Siu, who considered himself the best and coolest here. MC went to him and said that he should apologize for it. He doesn't mind that he takes his place. Taesan noted, weapons and skills are just tools. No matter what weapon he holds, he must know himself to unlock true power. From today on, he is his disciple. He thanked him and the other trainees congratulated him on this. Meanwhile, Yunhee ran into trouble. It turns out she was bullied at school, and right now she was driven into a deserted alley to teach her a lesson. Jinte lifted her head by the hair and said, she should have just left when they told her to. This is what happens when you don't want to leave the good way. A girl sat down next to her and said that seeing their Yunhee in such a state, just because she once meddled in something that wasn't her business, was absolutely heartbreaking for her as her classmate. Did she really want to help her friend that badly? And yet, before helping, she should have looked at who she was dealing with. What was she thinking? Getting involved with Jinte? Jinte asked what she would do now. Now she has no friends to help each other. And she is all alone, right? Her friend decided to jump off the roof alone and is now in the hospital. She immediately looked at him with a furious glare and he hesitated and then said, when she looks at him like that, he wants to hit her even harder. From the punch to the face, she immediately fell, and a man, a B-rank hunter, called out to Jinte. Jinte noted that he was early, then turned to the girl and said that they were leaving now, so she needed to keep an eye on her so that she did not run away. He passed by the hunter and said that he would also go with them. He asked where they were going, and he asked why he thought he called him. Of course, they were going somewhere where there were no people, where they could have fun to their heart's content. Meanwhile, Yul was walking towards the exit of the bureau. Jung-hee decided to accompany him and said, he must be lucky. He became an apprentice of an S-rank hunter, and the master even allowed him to choose any weapon he wanted. But is this spear really enough? He looked at the weapon with a smile and told her that it was enough for him, because there was nothing better than this. This is an evolutionary spear loga. It can evolve into a form according to the will of the user, based on adaptation to the environment. Jung-hee stretched her neck and asked why there were so many strange events today. It was long past work time. He hid the weapon and asked if the monitoring department really thought that just standing by was also work. She got angry and was about to hit him, and at that moment, the MC heard a security guard not letting someone in. The woman tried to force her way in and asked if the deputy and Yul were still inside. She just needed to meet him for a minute and then she would leave immediately. The guard said that unauthorized entry was strictly prohibited. If it was truly urgent, she should call him. She exclaimed in response that she was there because he wasn't answering his phone. The MC, surprised, called her boss. She immediately ran up to him with an anxious look, grabbed him by the clothes and said that their Yunhee was dragged into the yellow zone. He was instantly overcome with rage and asked, who did this? Meanwhile, the schoolchildren were already in the forest. The girl looked around warily and asked Jinte, is he sure it's safe to go that far? He told her that this was exactly why they had brought a B-rank hunter with them, and that they needed to find out who would win in a fight, the monster or her. Yunhee was scared, and then the guy put his arm around her shoulder and asked if she had really lost her nerve. She shouldn't worry so much. The monsters here were pretty weak. If she fought with the same passion with which she had slapped him, she would easily win. She bit her lip nervously and then broke into a run. Jinte smirked and ordered the hunter to grab her, and she thought, knowing him, he would really make her fight. She didn't want to die. She needed to escape, no matter what. And then she tripped over the hunter's leg and fell face first into the ground, after which, the man pinned her down and she loudly called for help. The girl asked, why are you straining your voice like that? There's no one here anyway. A buzzing sound came from above. The hunter took out his weapon and told them to step back. Someone was coming. The girl became nervous and asked, is it a monster? Even if so, Jinte said the creatures here were weak. Suddenly, spikes flew at them at high speed. The guys dodged, but the girl was unlucky. A spike hit her in the chest and, judging by her rapidly blackening veins, it was poisoned. She screamed in pain, and the hunter told Jinte to run back immediately, and he cursed, asking what that was. The man answered him that it was a thrower's sting. Yul was already in the forest at this time. He called his friend from the combat department and thanked him for taking on such a reckless request. He heard that he was the one who informed the boss about Yunhee's location. Kang Jongmin told him that he was simply responding to a missing persons report. In any case, he doesn't know why he needed to go there alone, but he should take care of himself. He noted that it was a bit late to worry about him and ended the call. He glanced at the seething swamps and thought that this was the last place he wanted to live. The yellow zone is a restricted area, cordoned off after the breakout, when the situation in this area got out of control. The monsters in this zone are not particularly strong, but he heard that they are cunning and difficult to deal with. Now that he has encountered them in person, they simply take over with numbers. They seem even weaker than the red goblins. And yet, an unawakened civilian wouldn't last long here. He needs to save Yunhee as soon as possible. Stingers flew at him. He almost got hit. It turns out an entire swarm was targeting him. He created a sphere and said that these bugs were just rushing at him from the very entrance, but he didn't have time for this. He opened the sphere, in which the goblins had already managed to kill a couple of beetles, and told them to call their friends. The beetles suddenly increased in number. Yule noted with a nervous grin that they really had a lot of friends, after which they rushed to attack, and he broke into a run. He placed the sphere in front of him, jumped to the side, and the beetles began to be sucked into the labyrinth. He thought that it was getting a little dangerous. The number of monsters in the labyrinth began to drop rapidly. If he lured them even deeper into the labyrinth, it would collapse. And yet, there were too many for him to cope alone. He decided to use the last method, jumped into the swamp, and opened a portal to the labyrinth, sucking them inside. Then he threw the sphere straight into the swamp, and all the water began to be sucked in at once. The beetles killed the goblins in the meantime, but then a powerful stream of poisonous water fell on them, and they died. MC's heart even hurt. Restoring the labyrinth after this would be a real hassle. That's why he was so reluctant to resort to this method, and yet, finally, everything here became quiet. Meanwhile, the schoolchildren ran as fast as they could. Jintai asked, "How long will they pursue them?" He turned to the man and exclaimed, "Why can't he, as a B-rank hunter, handle even these bugs? And why did he have to run for his life?" He answered him that there were too many of them for him to handle alone, and the guy told him to shut up. It was enough that he was angry that they were lost, and on top of that, this so-called B-rank hunter was completely useless. The insects started throwing their stingers again. One of them hit Jintai's friend, and he fell, leaving only him and Yunhee among the children. Seeing the monster licking its lips greedily, he turned to the hunter in fear and warned him that there were even more of them out there. The bugs started approaching. He grabbed Yunhee by the hair and positioned her in front of himself as a shield. Then suddenly something pierced the monster's body, thanks to which they were saved. Jintai turned to the hunter and asked, "Who the hell is he?" Yule called him a little idiot and told him that he was a hunter from the management bureau. So they were the ones who dragged Yunhee here? She immediately threw herself into his arms and burst into tears, and he asked if she was okay, and noted that he had never seen her cry before. Jintai called out to him and asked, "He knows the way out of here, right? He would pay him as soon as they got out, so he should lead them to the exit quickly." Yunhee wiped her tears and suggested that they just ignore him and leave, but MC couldn't leave this situation that easily. He apologized to her and knocked her out, saying that he would finish this quickly and take her to safety. The guy got nervous and asked what he was doing. He stuck his spear into the ground and flexed his fists, asking in response, "What does that look like?" He was about to do something Yunhee shouldn't see. Jintai got angry and exclaimed, "Does he even know who he is?" He replied that any hunter from the bureau would recognize him just by looking at his face. Park Jintai, son of Supreme Court Judge Park Beomjin. School bullying, theft, drunk driving, a scumbag who commits any crime and simply buys his way out of it. The boy defiantly asked, "What will he do to him?" He kicked him in the leg, causing him to fall and burst into tears. Then he grabbed him by the clothes and swung his fist, asking, "He must have really enjoyed the fact that money had solved all his problems till now?" He asked, "Let him try to buy his way out of this too." Just as he was about to hit him, the hunter attacked, but he managed to react and dodge, remarking, "It looks like his bug hunt is finally over." He remained silent, and Jintai exclaimed that begging wouldn't save him now. He should just die here with this fool. The hunter lunged at him. Yule deftly dodged every blow and, having grabbed the spear more comfortably, went into a block. He said that he had only planned to slightly dent him, but it looks like that is out of the question. He was the one who tried to kill him first, right? He attacked. The man blocked it and thought that most of the bureau hunters were only D rank. So why was he being pressed so much then? If he were B rank, he would never have missed his face. This guy, is he really a bureau hunter? No, it doesn't matter who he is. If his weapon is a spear, he just needs to close the distance and destroy him. He abruptly approached him. MC grabbed his hand and said that if he got that close, he would have no choice but to punch him. He punched him in the face with all his might, sending him flying several meters back, right at Jintai's feet. He grabbed his head in panic and told him to get up immediately. Did he buy his hunter's license or something? He's B rank. Yule was surprised to learn his rank. Did his stats from leveling up on the Hornets finally surpass a B rank hunter? He smiled. Then Jintai picked up a rock and pounced on him, telling him to wipe that smirk off his face. MC hit him with a spear, knocking him down, and he fell and hit his head. Yule walked around him and asked how it felt. He'd never been hit like that before, right? The people he'd tortured up until that point must have felt pain tens of times worse than this. Jintai exclaimed that if he had a problem with that, he should have acquired power, money, or something. That's just the way the world works. Why the hell is he preaching to him here? MC said, as he thought, a hopeless brat like him is better off not existing at all. The guy was nervous and asked what he was up to, and he told him not to worry. He didn't think he could make a jerk like him suffer the way he deserved. He took Yunhee and walked towards the exit, saying, "So he'll leave him for those who are truly hungry." A pack of wolves emerged from the forest. The animals surrounded him, and he began waving his arms in panic, telling them to get away from him. After that, he screamed his last curse, and a wolf bit him in the neck. They threw him to the ground, and Yule, ignoring the screams, slowly walked on. Yunhee's kidnapping, which took place in the Yellow Zone, finally came to an end, and she returned to the warm embrace of her family. Kang Jongmin said that the Bureau had already tracked down the officials who allowed Park Jintai to enter the Yellow Zone. There will be an incredible noise for a long time. Along with the disciplinary measures taken against these officials, the story spread like wildfire in the media, and with the resignation of Supreme Court Judge Park Bae-umjin, the incident was finally resolved. Sometime later, a new quest appeared before Yule. He had 30 days to destroy the Hornet Queen. As a reward, he would receive the Poison Sting Dagger, 100 gold, and the Queen's Royal Jelly. The penalty for failure was a 50% reduction in effectiveness against insect-type monsters. The Hornet Queen must be the same one he saw on his way out of the Yellow Zone, the creature the other hornets protect. She won't be easy to catch, but he wants to destroy her. Even ordinary hornets have the power to destroy a labyrinth, so the Queen, the pinnacle of this hive, must be even stronger. He said goodbye to his colleagues, saying he had somewhere to go, so he would go first, and his boss said he appreciated his enthusiasm. But he finished today's paperwork before leaving, didn't he? MC stared at him for a few seconds, then left silently. 1 month until the Hornet's quest expires. They will surely increase their strength during that time, so he should also prepare properly. He approached the dojo, where Taesun was already waiting for him. He noticed that he was late. He should hurry in. His training begins immediately. After he changed, Taesun announced that he was now the successor, but he shouldn't worry so much. Even among the successors, there are only 2 who rank higher than him. But the training that awaits him is like an impenetrable mountain. They walked into the training hall. Jangensu told the master that he was ready, and Taesun waved his hand, praising him for a job well done. Passing by, Yule bowed slightly, greeting him, and he frowned slightly. Taesun led him to the monster's skull and said it was the jaw of a unique monster known as an iron ghoul. It was the first creature to ever bring him to the brink of death, and this was his task this time. He grabbed the handles on both jaws and then pulled them apart with all his might, opening the mouth. He noticed that he was still as strong as before, and then let go, and the jaws snapped shut with a loud thud. Gunsu applauded, saying that this was as expected of a master. He was incredible. MC, meanwhile, was very surprised and wondered what his body was made of. Was he an armadillo? Warming up, Taesun returned to him and told him to try now. He approached the skull and thought that his level was now superior to that of a B-rank hunter. He wouldn't be able to fully reveal it as a master, but he should at least try to get as far as he could. He put in all his effort, and Taesun said in surprise that this was unexpected. To think it didn't even move. This training will help him develop his overall physical strength, so let him keep trying. There will be no further training until he opens this jaw. He left, and while Yule was trying to somehow open it, Gunsu thought, he knew it, he's just showing off. A new day dawned. Gunsu was walking to the dojo as usual. It had been 2 years since he joined the Martial Arts Association. He worked harder than anyone to hone his skills and become the master's successor. But in the end, he took as his disciple not a B-rank hunter like him, or anyone higher, but some guy from the bureau. No matter how much he thought about it, it was unfair. Yule called out to him and noted that he was late today. Junsu said, on the contrary, he came early. He told him that even on his day off, he had to come early. He patted him on the shoulder and offered to be friends, especially since he was younger than him. To which he replied, maybe it was more convenient for him, but they couldn't afford it. He looked around and asked if he cleaned the dojo himself. He confirmed it. It was just a bit dirty, so he decided to help. Junsu went further and asked him not to do that again, since when he did that, those below him in rank felt awkward. MC asked if there was a need to divide responsibilities into higher and lower ones. If he had the time and desire, he would do it. Just because he was the successor didn't mean he wanted to shift his work onto others. They all came here to succeed together. Jonsu remained silent. It irritated him. For the next 2 weeks, this guy came to the dojo every single day and stayed to train longer than anyone else. Even though he's the successor, he doesn't brag about his position in front of others. He gets along with everyone and trains like crazy. That's why it irritates him even more, but he's exactly who he wants to be. Yule went to train again. He managed to slightly open his jaw, but it immediately snapped shut, and the other students said it was close. Just a little more, and he'd get it. MC tried to catch his breath. His hands were already raw. Junsu handed him a bottle of water and told him not to overexert himself. He smiled and said that he'd been preparing for friendship for a long time. A loud horn sounded outside, and Yule asked, "What's that?" Junsu answered that the Overcross Guild was heading out on a mission. He heard they were going to enter a nearby dungeon. It looked like it was today. MC asked, "Why are they going at such a late hour?" He told him that Overcross worked day and night because they had so many people. Yule remarked that he knew a lot about them, to which he replied, he just worked in this guild for a short time. Time passed, and morning came. The guild members emerged from the portal, and one of them noted that the work was finished in a day, faster than he expected, especially for catching a blood-steel orc. His colleague asked if it was really possible to catch monsters like that. His friend answered that it was actually prohibited, but if they sell this guy, they'll get at least 12 billion won. Their salaries don't appear out of nowhere. They come from selling monsters like this. His colleague asked, would the weapons of the orc tribe be worth anything? While they were discussing this, the orc locked in the magic cage started getting angry. The hunter said that no one would buy a necklace from such a trash monster, and finally lost his patience. He quietly climbed out of the cage. Meanwhile, Li-Han and his team had just finished work, and he glanced at his deputies, suggesting that they return to headquarters. MC said that then he would go straight to the Martial Arts Association, and he asked in surprise, what did that mean? They were finally gathering for a common dinner. He should come. Yule told him that he couldn't, and the master was not in the dojo today, so he decided to keep an eye on the students. Sirens blared, and all groups immediately received an emergency request for backup. A Category 3 monster, being transported illegally, had broken free and was causing a ruckus. The scene was the Korean Martial Arts Association. Right now, an orc was wreaking havoc, and the students scattered in panic. One of them tugged at a girl's hand, telling her they needed to get out of there quickly, but she didn't want to leave Gonsu there alone. He decided to hold off the orc in the hall, but the fight was difficult, and he suffered many wounds. Ever since he joined Overcross, he'd always considered himself a genius. He consoled himself with the thought that using subsidiary guilds was a natural privilege of the strong, but he was just another replaceable cog in that guild, and only then did he realize how cruel this world really was. And yet, he doesn't yet want to believe that the world is completely rotten, like the man who saved him without a word. Now he wants to help someone, because he wants to make this world at least a little better. He took the weapon and stood up, saying that this is how he managed to hold back for the past 2 years. The students in the hall started to run. Gonsu was barely able to stand, but he decided to hold on as long as he could, while his attention was focused on him. Even if it was just for a minute, even for another second, he had to do it. Just as the monster swung to strike, a hole suddenly appeared in the ceiling, and Yule landed on top of the monster, saying that he did well and let him handle the rest. He entered the labyrinth, pulled the orc along with him, and took off running. He brought him here, acting like a tough guy. But this monster was even more monstrous than he thought. This is a bloody steel orc. Did he really just finish a fight with the guild? He'd never seen anyone break through the walls in the labyrinth area before. It's not for nothing that he's called a high-ranking orc. He's having a hard time dealing with him alone right now, so he decided to do something. He waved his fingers, turning the wall, and local monsters pounced on the monster from all sides. While he was distracted, MC decided to find a loophole, but it wasn't that simple. The monster figured out his plan and threw a goblin at him, preventing him from advancing any further. The number of monsters in the labyrinth immediately decreased. Yule cursed and exclaimed that he had just finished repairs. Watching him easily deal with the poor goblins, he thought, it looks like ordinary monsters alone won't reveal the flaw in his defenses. He didn't want to use this since the risk was high, but if he hesitated, his tempered blood would continue to accumulate, so there was no choice. He would have to summon that guy. The boss of the labyrinth, Zeor, the huge ghoul, entered the scene. He grabbed the orc, ran and slammed him back into the wall, still holding him in place, and then he punched him in the face and began to press on his lower jaw. MC finally had an opening to strike. He took advantage of the moment and plunged his spear into the monster's hand. The orc screamed loudly. He dug his fingers into the ghoul's eyes, pressed harder, and killed him. The system warned Yule about the defeat of the labyrinth boss. Monster respawns are now disabled. MC was furious. He asked for it and exclaimed that because of him, his labyrinth boss was ground to dust. He kicked the wall, the steel rain trap immediately activated, and numerous arrows flew at the orc from all sides. While he defended himself, Yule approached him and delivered another blow, after which he ran to the side, and the monster lost his balance and fell. MC activated the next trap, a spiked ceiling. A huge slab fell on the monster, and blood splattered everywhere. He said he'd set and would set a bunch of traps just in case, and it seemed to have paid off. After that, the system notified him that the labyrinth's durability had dropped to 72%, with only 11 monsters remaining. The labyrinth would collapse if its durability dropped below 60%, or all the monsters were killed. The goblins standing next to him began to rejoice in their victory, and he scratched his head in confusion and thought, he's lost the labyrinth boss. This time, the loss is great. Still, without the labyrinth, catching him would have been difficult. Suddenly, the stone slab cracked, and the monster broke free from the trap and screamed in rage, now going berserk. Yule summoned a sphere and remarked that he was quite stubborn, but this place was about to collapse because of him. It should be quiet outside by now, so they'll finish it there. The two of them jumped through the portal, while Gunsu walked toward the dojo exit and thought that all the students had already been evacuated. But where did Yule go? And then he saw a sphere appearing in the courtyard, or rather, he simply felt mana suddenly appear out of nowhere. The sphere grew in size, a gust of wind hit him in the face, and when he looked back into the courtyard, he saw Yule fighting an orc. The monster lunged at him. Yule parried its blow, and wondered if he was only holding on because he was already exhausted. His attacks were even stronger than before, and his muscles seemed to ache again from the pain of simply blocking, but his body felt different than before. He smiled. So those 2 weeks of training weren't in vain. Even though it felt like his body was about to break, the strength continued to pulsate within him. Most of all, he felt the results of his training on his own skin. He launched a new attack, the tip of his spear gathering energy, and struck the monster with it. When blood sprayed from his mouth, he smirked and noted that it was actually kind of funny. The monster grabbed his spear, pulled it to the side, and threw Yule away. He hit the ground several times and eventually fell into the rubble, wondering, did he really think he couldn't pierce tempered blood without a weapon? Even in his rage, he could still think clearly. Then his eyes fell on the skull he'd been training with for the past 2 weeks. Throwing away his spear, the monster pounced on him, But before he could strike, Gunsu attacked. He stabbed his sword into its shoulder and told Yule that he'd buy him some time while he had the chance to grab a weapon. The monster waved his hand, sending him flying, causing him to hit the ground with his back. MC grabbed the skull and exclaimed that he already had a weapon. He struck the monster and said that now that his mind was clouded, he had a chance. The blow of that heavy skull shook the monster's brain. Yule decided to gather all the energy he had left and explode it. He used all his strength to open its mouth, then slammed its jaws shut on the monster's head. And finally, it was finished, just like his 2 weeks of training. The monster's body fell with a crash, the system notifying it of the unique rank, Demonic Dagger. MC looked at its body and thanked it. Now he could move on to the next training. Junsu was unconscious and saw the past, lying under the rubble, and finally woke up, hearing a voice. Opening his eyes, he blurrily saw his savior. It was a guy from the rescue squad, Yule. He snapped his eyes open, and the MC said, he finally woke up, and he's a really resilient guy when it comes to survival. Junsu looked at him with a smile and said it was him. He didn't understand what he was talking about and asked who else but him would take care of him here. Let him just lie down and rest. Now it's all over. The next day, a bunch of journalists gathered at the headquarters of the Management Bureau to ask the director of the Overcross Guild a few questions. When he left the bureau, they immediately pounced on him, asking him to say a few words about the incident. Does he admit that it happened during the illegal transportation of the monster? Junwon said that first of all, he would like to apologize to everyone affected. But the bloody steel orc is a monster of high scientific value. That's why, despite the risks, they brought him only to hand him over to the Bureau. He can't say more. For now, he will fully cooperate with the monitoring department's investigation. One of the journalists saw rescuer So Yul passing by the crowd with his superior, and they rushed to him, asking him to say something about the incident. They heard he was a D-rank hunter. How did he manage to defeat the orc? Lee Han put his arm around his shoulder and pulled him away from the crowd, saying they would do an interview later, but a streamer approached them and asked if the Bureau's response was too weak. The Bureau should monitor and regulate the activities of large guilds to prevent incidents like this, right? Then doesn't the Bureau also bear some responsibility? The MC turned around, asking what kind of nonsense he was talking about, and his boss told him to just ignore him. He was obviously a blogger who was paid big money to create biased content. Even if he argued, he would only lose. Yul smirked. They really were using every dirty trick they could. He wouldn't tolerate it and went straight to the guy. He pointed at his phone and asked if he was live right now. He confusedly confirmed it and asked what was going on, and he told him that he was going to say something and he wanted people to hear it in real time. He looked into the camera and shouted, "Does he enjoy getting paid to clean up after them?" He pointed at Junwon and exclaimed, "Those idiots litter everywhere, and they're the ones who always clean up after them. Can't they see that?" The reporter stared at him in shock, and then the MC smirked and asked the guild leader himself if he was right. He decided to smile in response, but it was clear he was very angry. Suddenly, Lee Han grabbed his subordinate by the hair and dragged him aside, asking them all for forgiveness. He wasn't feeling well. That's why he was talking nonsense. Junwon turned to his subordinate and asked if it was the guy who snapped at him earlier. The man confirmed it, and he remarked, "So it's true that a puppy has no fear of a tiger." He ordered him to crush that idiot immediately. The next day, people from the Monitoring and Rescue Department gathered in the conference room to discuss the video from yesterday involving Yule. The man said that, starting with that video, numerous media outlets began publishing material featuring Yule's deputy director, right up until today. Lee Han sighed and said, "Of course, it's true that their rescuer made an inappropriate remark, but even so, he thinks the punishment is too harsh. Frankly, the big guilds are to blame, and they're fine with those videos being edited. There are plenty of articles praising him." The head of the monitoring department, Hyun Ji-hyuk, said that whether the video was edited or not is irrelevant. It's widely talked about, meaning he should be punished. Lee Han countered by saying that the ones who should be punished are Overcross, or those who managed them. Ji-hyuk asked, "Does he mean to say that they handled the matter poorly?" The man asked, "Isn't that true?" He couldn't stand it any longer, slammed his fist on the table and jumped up, asking, "Have you completely lost your mind?" The director of the Management Bureau, Park Kwang-soo, told them both to stop. Yule's rescue rate has been 100% lately, right? Lee Han confirmed this and said, "Then he's an even more valuable asset that they can't afford to lose." Realistically, they depend on large guilds, but they still have to maintain the Bureau's authority. Gi-hyuk asked him if he had a plan, and he said, "Since they've made such an interesting move, they might not be able to repay them in full, but they must repay them accordingly." After that, he called Yule into his office. As soon as he entered, he told him to sit down first, as he needed to discuss something important with him. He brewed some tea and asked how it tasted, to which Yule replied that with tea like that, you could even open a cafe. The man said he was glad to hear it, but he was just curious about something. If he were to take the rank test again, what grade did he think he would get? He answered that it was hard for him to say for sure, but it definitely wouldn't be his current rank. The director smiled and said that he thought so. Lately, his achievements have been far beyond D rank. Of course, he must understand that they don't have it easy either. Quite a few people are trying to spread rumors about him. MC didn't quite understand what he was getting at. Was he implying that since he was covering for him, he should reveal his secrets? Bureau Management Director Park Kwang-soo was a seasoned politician who had held the position for many years. He remembered what his boss had told him. He had to be honest and humble in front of him. No matter how hard he tried to outsmart him, he would ultimately be the one who lost. He had followed his boss's advice so far, but was it even safe to talk about the labyrinth? Kwang-soo understood what he was thinking and told him not to worry. He wouldn't ask how he had become stronger, at least not yet. Something else was important right now. Right now, the management bureau needs strength, so he'll get straight to the point. He sends him to the province. Some time passed. Junwon met with An-soo, and he informed him that the investigation had already been completed. He noted that they finished quickly, thanks to the monitoring department, and asked what he thought of Yule. He answered that they were from different departments, so he didn't know him well. But why was he so fixated on one rescuer? He answered that it was because there was nothing more irritating than a bug flying before your eyes. And Sue asked, so that's why he insisted on sending him to the province? Junwon advised him to watch his tone. He just wanted him to look at himself objectively. Suddenly, Yule's voice was heard behind them, saying, the two of them seem close. They turned to him and greeted him, and Junwon said, it seems they are destined to be connected after all. He heard the news during the investigation. He was being sent to the province. And Shu called out indignantly, and the MC calmly noted, the appointment order hadn't even gone out yet, and an outsider had already found out about it first. Was he spying on him? But he shouldn't worry. It was just a 6-month assignment. Junwon smirked and remarked that he was quite optimistic. He'd heard that such assignments were only given to department heads higher up. He didn't think this was an assignment, right? Let him face reality. Yule said that An-su's supervisor probably didn't know either. He was going to announce it anyway. As of today, he'd been promoted from rank 8 to rank 6, a jump of 2 ranks, making him a senior officer. They were both very surprised, and the MC noted that, judging by his expression, he wasn't particularly happy about the promotion. Junwon quickly pulled himself together and congratulated him on it. He was just curious about something. Do they hand out promotions on a whim here? He replied that this meant the bureau had no intention of losing such talent. It seemed things hadn't gone according to his plan. They both glared at each other, and An-su asked what they were doing. He told Junwon that he had to leave, and he apologized. He'd gotten distracted for a moment, and it was time for them to go back. They both walked on, and Yule asked if he wanted advice. Trying to break him with this transfer to the province was his mistake. No matter where he sent him, he'd still be the best in the rescue department. He left. Junwon stared at one point with a gloomy face, and then walked up to the wall and slammed his fist against it with all his might, letting out his emotions. The plaster fell to the floor, and he cursed in anger. Meanwhile, the bureau director was enjoying the night view from the window and recalling his recent conversation with Yule. When he told him about the transfer to the province, he told him not to worry. At first glance, it looks like a demotion, but it's just a 6-month business trip. Of course, he'll need to show results, then no one will be able to touch him. Noticing him deep in thought, he asked if there was something else bothering him. MC apologized for getting distracted and thanked him for his concern, but he had one more request. Since he was going there anyway, let him send him where he's really needed. Kwang-soo smiled and thought, how could he say such a thing in this situation? He's not an easy guy at all. The next day, when he arrived at the office, Yule's colleagues were very surprised by his promotion and business trip. One of them turned to the department head and asked if he knew about it. Lee Han replied that of course he knew. He was the boss after all. The guy asked, how were they supposed to handle the rescue without him? He replied that they would work as usual. More importantly, he got a week's vacation before leaving. Let him call him, find out if he's coming to the office party today. The guy took out his phone and mumbled, who comes to an office party while on vacation? He called Yule, who answered right away and said he was busy, and he asked what exactly he was doing. He told him that he was settling some unfinished business. Right now, he was dealing with a hornet's nest. After all, he decided to complete that task before leaving. He told him to call back later and turned off the phone, after which he thought 3 days left. He got here faster than expected. These hornets are churning out troops like crazy, but it doesn't matter. As long as he can still move, he will defeat them. In the end, all he needs is a queen. With this thought, he rushed forward. A multitude of stingers immediately flew at him, but he knocked them down with a spear, and looking at the new kind of monster, thought, did they even create this? They can be summoned infinitely, as long as there is enough mental strength. This monster can fire stingers like bullets, but the queen usually avoids creating them. They consume too much energy. Had they prepared for his arrival in advance? In any case, if the fight dragged on, he would simply be surrounded. Before that happened, he needed to get rid of them. He threw the sphere at them. They were immediately sucked into the portal, and he ran to the queen, thinking that he could still handle so many with just the traps of the labyrinth. And thanks to the sphere, the nearby hornets would not be able to keep their balance. He would use this to reach the hive. The hornets sharply descended and began to surround him. He immediately noticed that their behavior had just changed. They pressed themselves to the ground to avoid the pull of the sphere. This and the new species of hornet confirm his guess. The queen has long been wary of him. He's flattered. She's using her tiny brain to track him down. But he has a plan too. Since the labyrinth's monsters can't respawn right now, he needs to be as efficient as possible. Enter the labyrinth, place only the bare minimum of monsters, and then leave the labyrinth. This is the most efficient use of the sphere. He exited the labyrinth straight onto the queen's nest. One swing was enough for him to cut the hive open. And then he peered inside and told the queen to stop hiding and finally show herself. She didn't even flinch. She released even more pheromones, and he wondered if she was trying to gather a swarm. But that wasn't it. She summoned someone else. Someone rushed at him from above, his sixth sense activated, and thanks to this, he managed to dodge. Now he realized that she wasn't summoning a swarm, but this thing, her ultimate weapon, the whipwing. The monster rushed to attack, but MC decided to run and thought, she even created something that consumed twice as many resources. She really was preparing for his arrival. But since she summoned him, it means that as soon as he falls, the queen will become defenseless. He stopped and created a sphere, and while the portal was sucking in the beetle, he rushed towards the queen. With a loud roar, the whipwing rushed after him. He caught up with it and pounced on him, causing them both to fall to the ground, and Yule thought, did he cut off his own leg to escape the sphere? And yet this creature has insane wing power. He noticed the queen approaching him. She wanted to hit him with her sting, and he, summoning the sphere, said, the two of them are starting to irritate him. But no matter how hard they resist, nothing will change. The two of them were sucked into the sphere, and he followed them there. He stretched and said that it wasn't planned, but it would do. After all, they were now trapped in his territory. For their own sake, let them not twitch in vain. Whipwing wasn't interested in listening to him at all and rushed to attack. And then MC opened the map and noticed that he was talking to monsters. It seemed he was the only weird guy here. He pressed the wall between them. A trap immediately activated, and arrows flew at them, but Whipwing deftly dodged them and even managed to protect the queen. Yule thought that he completely lived up to his name. One swing, and he protects both the queen and the entire hive. But attacks don't necessarily have to come from one side. The trap was located on the ceiling. The monster didn't notice this, and the arrows pierced his entire body, and he finally died. MC went to the queen and said that he told you so. Resistance is useless. He'd rigged this place with traps specifically to deal with her. Now that her ultimate weapon was down, it looked like they were finally alone. He held his spear out and charged, thinking that the queen's shell was strong enough to withstand a hail of steel, which meant it wouldn't be easy to pierce it with regular attacks. Instead of wasting his energy, he'd simply sneak under her shell. That's what he wanted to do, but the queen wasn't about to sit idle either, and she jerked sharply, protecting her belly. She struck, he blocked it, and was pushed back. After that, he smirked and thought, is she just going to sit on the defensive? Nothing comes easy. There are 3 days left until the end of the quest, plenty of time, but he wants to end this right now. If he leaves the labyrinth just because he has time to spare, it will look like he's run away from her. He set a trap beneath her, and an explosion immediately occurred, flipping the queen onto her belly, leaving her unable to defend herself. MC charged forward and thought, although this reduces the weapon's durability, the destructive power of this technique is worth it. The queen fell on her back, and he charged his spear with energy and said, since this was his first time using this technique, it would be right to try it on her. He struck her in the belly with all his might. She screamed loudly, and flames pierced her body. After this, the system congratulated Yule on completing the quest. He had destroyed the Hornet Queen. He stopped near her and caught his breath. When his flames subsided, he looked at his burnt palm and thought, so far he had saved many people. However, in the end, he was just a weakling, helpless in the face of powerful monsters. Today, he was once again convinced that he would not run away anymore. His level had increased several times, and he'd also received his promised quest reward, so he decided to check it out right away. The Poison Sting Dagger was a rare rank weapon with a 95% chance of inflicting paralysis on monsters 2 stars and below when attacking. For monsters 3 stars and above, the chance dropped to 30%. With this weapon, attack speed increased by 12%. He figured it might come in handy depending on the situation, but what was more important right now was this: the Queen Hornet's Royal Jelly. It was a rare, one-time use item. When consumed, it would alter his constitution, significantly increasing his sensitivity to mana, but he had to be wary of the side effects. He figured that when a trap was triggered, mana was automatically consumed, so as the number of traps increased, he needed to increase his mana reserves. He drank the royal jelly. His eyes immediately lit up, and he felt a wild surge of strength. The mana hidden in the royal jelly spread throughout his entire body, and it felt like it was about to burst apart from the inside. He wouldn't let that happen after all the effort he'd put in. He needed to maximize the circulation of his mana through breathing and force his blood vessels to accept the true chi. He closed his eyes and concentrated, after which the system informed him that his physique had changed to a special, peach-colored core of 10,000 souls. MC felt it immediately. His overall physical condition had improved. He wondered, all this from just one serving of royal jelly? No, that was only natural. After all, this was what he was risking his life for on quests. But what side effects awaited him? He decided to think about that later. The most interesting part was starting now, replenishing the labyrinth's monsters. The only monsters left in the labyrinth at the moment were just red goblins. No matter how strong he became, he would quickly reach his limit alone, so he needed to replenish his supplies. The system told him that a new trap had been unlocked after defeating the Queen Hornet, the Lake of Decay. If he placed the body of a monster or an awakened being in this lake, the experience or traits the body possessed would be transferred to the selected monsters in the labyrinth. This meant that if he applied the effect of the Lake of Decay to this hive, all the larvae would become stronger at the same time. The system notified him that the larvae in the hive had been incorporated into the monster labyrinth, and he wondered which one he should make the boss. He peered into the hive and pointed to one of the larvae, noting that it looked much larger than the others. He named her Vespa, and said that from now on, he would bring her the most delicious prey. After that, Yule healed his wounds and went out for a drink with Jongmin. They had already had a drink, and Jongmin said, "Just think, Lee Jong-hee herself suggested meeting." Apparently, she was secretly worried about him being sent on a mission. He sighed with displeasure and asked how someone like her could be later than them. Jungmin said that her being late was already common. He only had a couple of days left before he had to leave. What had he been doing all this time? He answered that he was always looking for food for the creature he was raising. Jungmin asked if he had gotten some kind of rare animal. MC said that besides that, on the director's advice, he went and retook the rank test. The guy noted that while the others would have been relaxing on vacation or something, he was working. He knows that he is the weirdest of their class, right? By the way, something has been bothering him for a long time. Doesn't it seem to him that everyone around is looking only in their direction? And only women. Yul said with a smile that he knew that he was not the only one who thought so. Did he get more handsome during his vacation or something? He replied that he didn't think it was him. Jong-hee finally arrived, and with a smirk she said that His Majesty had deigned to appear. Was the meat fried yet? MC remarked that she was rather shameless for someone who was late. He wanted to give her a suitable nickname, but stopped mid-sentence and worriedly asked if she had a nosebleed. After that, they shoved cotton wool up her nostril and she sat down at the table to fry the meat, but she acted very strangely, just sitting with her eyes closed. Jungmin couldn't stand it and asked her to let him fry the meat himself, which immediately made her angry and exclaimed she said she would cook everything herself today. Jungmin then asked her to at least keep an eye on the meat, and Yul told her to just forget about it. She was making him nervous. God forbid she ruined such good meat. It was all about the scent emanating from him. She kept her eyes closed, trying to resist it, and when she thought she had calmed down more or less, she carefully opened one eye and looked at him. He asked her what she was doing, and she saw him in a completely new light, handsome, charming, and attractive. She immediately hit her head on the table with all her force and fell to the floor. The guys got scared and rushed to her aid. The MC pressed a cold towel to her forehead and asked someone to call an ambulance. An embarrassed girl came up to him and handed him her phone, asking for his number. He was confused. How could she even do this in such a situation? Is she crazy? And then a guess finally occurred to Yule. He realized that these were the same side effects. Now he knew what was going on and could control it. And soon Jung-yi came to her senses. They went out for some fresh air, drank a can of beer, glanced at Yule, and when she didn't feel anything, she sighed with relief and said, "It seems she was so tired that her brain short-circuited for a second." Jungmin advised her to stop working overtime, and the MC, with an apologetic smile in his mind, apologized to her. Actually, it's because of him. A special body constitution developed after consuming royal jelly, captivating peach blossom. It's similar to how a queen bee controls worker bees with pheromones. He had no idea that this would have a side effect. Adoration from girls. It's annoying, but he will have to be more careful from now on, because if he doesn't concentrate periodically, the pheromones will start to spread. Jung-hee smiled and asked, even if she was tired, her heart couldn't be pounding that hard, could it? In fact, at that moment, maybe she really did fall in love with Yule? He shuddered, asked her to go to the hospital later, and she indignantly exclaimed that he could have played along with her joke. He hadn't had such a normal day in a long time. Lately, he had been focused only on getting stronger, so he might as well enjoy a normal day at least today. Once he left, he wouldn't be able to rest for a long time. In the morning, a bureau employee came to the director to tell him the results of Seo Yul's recent test. Kwang-soo looked over the results and noted that he had a magnitude of 7.5, and given that the standard for an S rank is 7.8, he was practically at S rank level. The bureau employee agreed with him. If they leaked this information to the media, He believed it would greatly benefit the bureau's reputation. But the director wasn't planning on doing so yet and asked him to keep it between them. He was surprised and asked the reason, and Seo Yul said that he didn't want to burden him right now. And besides, everything would come out on its own when the time came. Meanwhile, Yul set off on a ship, and on deck he could finally catch his breath. To think that his colleagues had followed him all the way to the port, just to grumble about him not doing his paperwork. In any case, this place is pretty strange. For such a huge ship, there are too few people here. A boy approached him and asked if he was also going to Ulangdo. He confirmed this and asked what was the matter, to which he replied, he just rarely sees anyone boarding this ship. He asked, does this mean he sails here often? He answered him that this is not entirely true, but he goes with his grandmother to visit his parents' graves every anniversary. Yul immediately felt uneasy, and the boy said that everything is fine. It happened a long time ago, so he is fine. He doesn't know why he is going to Ulungdo, but he should be careful. He lives there. It is a dangerous place. After that, he approached his grandmother and she asked if he bought anything to drink. He showed her the glasses and said with a smile that he bought her the one she liked. And MC wondered if he was really just a kid. Ulungdo is one of the officially recognized danger zones. Gates appear here quite often, given the size of the island, but there is also an acute shortage of forgiven people. As a result, the island has had the lowest security rating for many years. It is known that government subsidies have also been stopped. Although it is such a dangerous place, the reason the residents do not leave is probably because this is their home. A storm suddenly arose, the ship rocked, and the boy and grandmother fell. It turned out that a kraken was raging outside. Yul ran onto the deck to check what was going on, and seeing this giant octopus, he became very nervous. The system immediately gave him an extermination quest. He needs to kill the kraken, trying to wake up from sleep. The encounter limit with the target is 3 times. The countdown begins upon encountering the kraken. As a reward, he'll receive a ticket for 2 attempts at the random skill and equipment roulette, and if he fails, his health and mana regeneration will be reduced by 15%, and his Labyrinth designer qualification will be suspended for 60 days. MC thought, so this is the quest this time? The penalty for failure is worse than he thought. Plus, judging by the conditions, it looks like he won't be able to leave until he exterminates it. Although he hadn't planned to leave anyway, he won't leave until he solves the problem. Some time ago, at the Ulongdo branch office, a guy had just finished submitting a report on the rescue department's work, and the branch manager, Cha Seokyeon, asked, so essentially, he means there's no difference compared to last month? He confirmed this, and the man put his feet up on the table, saying that's fine, let it stay that way. If he's finished with the report, he should leave here and get back to work. The guy thanked him for his work, and at that moment, the head's younger brother, Cha Do-hyun, poked his head into the meeting room and asked if he shouldn't have been given the position of head of the rescue department this time. Seokyeon replied that, on the director's orders, the position had been taken by an outsider who was arriving tomorrow. Do-hyun cursed, asking who this idiot was, and he replied that he'd probably seen him online at least once. He was the guy who crossed Overcross. Do-hyun asked, so it was CEO Baek Junwon who sent him here. Do-hyun replied that that wasn't true. It seemed like the guy himself didn't know anything about it. In any case, whether it's Overcross or them, they help each other, so they should maintain their reputation. So when that guy arrives, let him greet him in his place. He can at least do that for his brother, right? If he makes that guy disappear from here, not only will they get a gift from the guild, but he will also become head of the rescue department. Even earlier, when the director and Yul were just discussing his upcoming business trip, he warned him that there were a lot of problems on Ulongdo right now. But the first thing he would have to deal with was the rescue department and the manager of the Ulongdo branch, Seokyeon, because that department was his main concern. He had appropriated the magic stones that the rescue department obtained during monster hunts for his own personal gain, but they wouldn't be able to remove him because he had too many followers, and the employees sent there quit before they even had time to get used to the island. So there was little they could do about it. MC asked if this was true. Kwangsu confirmed it. They knew he was doing wrong, but he still somehow managed to keep things going there. That's why they had high hopes for him. This time, they wouldn't even announce the duration of his trip, and he would personally support him. In short, the situation would change depending on his results. And now Yul has finally arrived. He approached the administration building and noticed that even it was in complete disrepair. Inside, he was met by Yoon Sungjae, a very friendly guy. The MC walked down the hallway and asked where the rest of the rescue department staff were. Sungjae ran after him and told him that 7 of them were currently on patrol. The rest were waiting in the office. Right now, everyone in the office was playing cards. Yul walked in there, and his face immediately gloomed. One of the guys saw them and asked Sungjae who was with him. He mumbled, trying to find the words, and the MC told the guy that he was the one who would be giving them orders from now on. He smiled and asked, is he the guy who was sent here for talking too much? Then he doesn't want to have a drink to celebrate his arrival? Everyone else supported him and started asking Yul for a drink, saying that they don't have welcome parties here. But the MC immediately decided to establish discipline and broke the bottle, and everyone immediately fell silent. The guy cursed, asking what the hell he was doing, and Yule sternly ordered everyone to listen to him carefully. From now on, they will clean this place until not a speck of dust remains. Did they all understand? The guy called him crazy and wanted to say something else, but Do-hyun stopped him and told Yule that he understands. He is happy to become the curator, but they have their own hierarchy here. Where does he get so much impudence? The MC noticed that his face is painfully creepy. Does he want to forget about ranks and test him? He answered him that he listened. He is just a D-rank hunter. Why is he so confident? Yule offered him this option. If he lost, he would quietly leave. But if he, Do-hyun, lost, then he should send him to the hospital right away. With such a face, he could easily be mistaken for a monster. The other guys couldn't hold back their laughter, which made Do-hyun angry and attacked him with his fists. But the MC easily dodged his first attack and immediately struck him in the face with a counterpunch that sent him flying across the room. He certainly didn't expect that, and Yule said that today was the first and last time he would use force against him, because from now on, he wouldn't be able to even cross him. He approached him. The guy wanted to attack him, but then he kneed him in the arm, and he, feeling terrible pain, screamed loudly. A large bruise immediately appeared at the site of the blow. Then the MC kneed him in the face, ordering him to shut up. Do-hyun fell, and Yule noticed that the most violent one had finally calmed down. Anyone else want to fight him? They remained silent, and he said, "It's good that no one wants to." He called out to Sungjae, since he is a healer, and asked him to treat this idiot. Meanwhile, the guys were having fun in the warehouse. Among them was the branch manager. One of his subordinates approached him and asked if he told him not to look for him when he was here. He apologized to him, but it was urgent. After that, he whispered to him about everything, and he rolled his eyes. Meanwhile, MC was tidying up the department. He said that he didn't care what they did after work, but at least while they were in the rescue department, they should only think about saving people during work hours. Did they understand everything? They remained silent, and he threateningly softened his fists and ordered them to respond immediately. They exclaimed in response that they understood everything, and then he said, "Of course, talking alone won't motivate them, which is why he's going to talk to management about raising their salaries by 15%. They all immediately started counting how much money they would receive, and excitedly asked, "He's not lying, right?" The MC thought that this was a dangerous zone. Given what would happen here, management should at least accept this. He clapped his hands, drawing attention to himself, and said, "Of course, they all have to change themselves first. Let them look forward to it. Tomorrow will be fun." The manager's voice was heard from the door, saying, he's also looking forward to the salary increase. They introduced themselves, after which Sokyeon came up and shook his hand, asking if his people had received him properly. He replied that they had given him a very warm welcome, especially Do-hyun. That guy winced, and the others quietly laughed, and Yule asked Sokyeon what brought him here. He asked in response, does he need a reason to be here? He cares deeply about the rescue department, so he can come here even without a reason. He just came by to say hello first, but let him know if he needs anything in the future. He will help him in any way he can. MC smirked and said that he appreciated his concern. It seems he has been playing cards all day, since he does not know anything about the message from the administration. From today, Ulleungdo has become a disaster zone. During emergencies, certain departments can act independently. Is he aware of this? From now on, the rescue department will be under his exclusive control. So the branch manager has only one thing left to do: leave here. Night has fallen. The main feature of Ulleungdo Island is that gates can appear in very different places, so it requires unconventional positions for raids and special tactics suited to the situation. A gate appeared right above the water, an alarm was raised, and a rescue team moved out to eliminate the threat. They approached the coast. A guy named Han Gangmu asked the boss if he was sure everything was correct. He adjusted his visor and told him that the design was not very good, but this item shows coordinates, so he should be patient. He said that was not the issue at all. Not only were there only 2 ranged fighters in the vanguard, but everyone who deals damage except the healer was assigned to tanks. What if they all accidentally get wiped out? Yule answered him that with so many people, this was the only way to minimize losses. Let them get ready. The monsters are close. They froze, and the guy noticed that they were completely invisible. MC pointed in the direction and ordered them to aim. As soon as they raised their weapons, he ordered them to open fire, and glowing projectiles flew straight at the monsters, flying over the sea. The projectiles pierced the harpies. They fell, and one of the hunters exclaimed in surprise, "Did he really hit?" And he took them all out in one fell swoop. He even read their trajectory. Yule told them to stop chatting and prepare for the second wave. He'd make sure those creatures wouldn't even have time to get close. Days passed, and under Yule's leadership, the situation gradually improved. The branch manager received a report. 98% rescue success rate, and the citizens' trust level had risen to 85%. Sokyeon slammed the table in rage and exclaimed, "How did this little brat manage to double his numbers in just a month? So that's why old man Park Kwang-soo had so much faith in him?" He glanced out into the courtyard, where the boys were training right now, and noticed that there was a problem with that too. That idiot Do-hyun, instead of keeping an eye on his subordinates, was training with them for some reason. His phone beeped, and he answered excitedly, saying he'd been waiting for him to call. Jinwon said they hadn't heard from each other in a while. He'd heard rumors that Yule's arrival had improved things on the island, and he was just worried about his situation. Sokyeon suggested he get straight to the point, since he already knew. Could he help him? The man told him he was afraid that it would be difficult and that they needed to keep a low profile for now. Sokyeon asked, but if his influence grew, wouldn't that hurt him too? Junwon said, it's a shame they won't be able to do business anymore, but if Yul stayed there for at least 6 months, that would be enough. Sokyeon didn't understand what he was talking about, and he asked if he really didn't know his assignment was only for 6 months. Sokyeon cursed and hissed the bureau director's name, and the old man said, although, apparently, the length of time doesn't matter anymore. If Yul settles in there, it would even be to their advantage. Sokyeon noted that he'd been talking like he didn't care from the start. Did he really think he'd just give up? He mentioned Overcross, and Junwon told him to do whatever he wanted, as long as he was prepared for the consequences. Sokyeon apologized, and Junwon advised him to watch his language, assuming he was still in office by then. After that, the call ended, and Sokyeon thought that if this continued, he would lose everything. What should he do? He heard a beeping sound, and he noticed that those idiots from headquarters were sending requests at a time like this again. And then an idea occurred to him. He only had one way out to survive. Meanwhile, Junwon apologized to his interlocutor for being distracted by the call and asked if she was also heading to Ulungdo Island. Then, since she was already there, could he ask her for one personal errand? It was a girl nicknamed Reika. Soon, Yul's friends from the dojo arrived on the island and gathered all the hunters together for a special training session. Gunsu introduced himself and said that today he would conduct a training session on mana control. The guys became interested and started discussing them. Was this man also a student of the S-class hunter Kang Taesan? Were they really going to be taught martial arts too? Gunsu said that today he would teach them about the flowing wave, a technique that allows you to disperse blows using mana. Now he would demonstrate it to them. His partner swung a hammer at him, and he said that most people think that mana is only needed for skills, but if you learn to control its flow, you can repel such simple attacks. After these words, his partner hit him with the hammer with all his might, but it did not harm him at all. Gunsu asked if anyone wanted to try it. Let them raise their hands. The guys took their time, wondering how this was even possible, and then Do-hyun raised his hand and said it looked simple. He'd said he just needed to parry the blow, and he'd try. But in the end, he failed and fell over from the powerful blow. The MC placed a hammer next to him and said that even a mage can fall off his feet. Everything isn't as simple as it seems. So if they don't understand anything, let them ask, and now they'll start training on their own. Evening came, and while half of them were lying around exhausted, the others were still training. Yul thanked Gunsu for coming. He smiled and replied that he'd asked him. He couldn't refuse. By the way, contrary to rumors, everyone was trying really hard. He told him that he'd really set their minds straight, and a scream came from the side. Junsu glanced at the source of the sound and noticed that guy among them was somehow special. He was talking about Gongmu, and the MC told him that he was their main tank. Those with potential were gradually starting to appear. A loud howl came from somewhere in the forest. Gunsu immediately realized it was wolves, and Yul pointed out that they shouldn't be on this island. Junsu asked, "It's not a monster, right?" MC said there was no report of a gate appearing and decided to ignore it, but suddenly his sixth sense activated, and he immediately turned around, sensing something was wrong. He ran towards the sound and shouted that they needed to evacuate the villagers to shelter immediately. Right now, a whole pack of wolves was roaming the forest. They were heading towards the village, but Yul quickly caught up with them. Usually, in a situation like this, before a dungeon breach occurs, the branch manager must transmit the gate coordinates received from headquarters. He jumped out of the bushes at the monsters, took out a couple, and other hunters came to his aid. Some were holding off the werewolves, while others were leading the villagers to shelters. MC thought, if it had come to this, the branch manager had deliberately withheld the information. Even if he wanted to lower his stats at the cost of human casualties, didn't he understand that it would also hit him? Although most likely, he simply didn't have time to think. However, he would deal with this idiot later, but now he needed to stop the attack. He reached the very gates and summoned the sphere, released the hornets, and began clearing. Meanwhile, a crowd of monsters was at the entrance to shelter number 2. Fortunately, the inhabitants had managed to take cover and were currently being treated. One werewolf flew into the armored door with all his might, punching a hole in it, and Gangmu, standing guard, called out to Sungjae and warned him that the first line of defense was about to fall. He became worried and exclaimed, "So fast, they only just got here." He ordered the villagers to run, retreating to the second line of defense. After which he approached Gangmu and told him that the monsters were breaking through faster than expected. Maybe they should leave through the back exit to another shelter? He replied that it was probably the same in other places. Since the boss was gone, it would be up to the two of them to deal with everything here. Gangmu glanced at the werewolf peering inside through the hole and asked if he thought they could do it. Sungjae hesitated for a moment, then firmly told him that they should be able to do it. Even the boss couldn't defend all the shelters alone, so he left them to it while he went to hold the gate alone. If they died here, what would it be like for the boss? He pulled the switch and opened the door, telling his comrade not to worry. He had basic attack skills. Gangmu took a deep breath, gathering his courage. Only with the boss's arrival was he able to feel proud of their squad, so he gave his all in every training session. He was different now. The monsters burst into the shelter en masse. He prepared himself and told the monsters to attack, but they wouldn't get through here. Sungjae supported him with magic, and he rushed into battle. Meanwhile, Reika was running around the island, and a werewolf was chasing her. He swung his claws in her face, but fortunately, he only tore her clothes. She reached for the weapon on her belt and was about to attack back when Yule appeared. He plunged his spear into the monster's scruff and knocked it to the ground. Then another werewolf attacked him from above, but its hornets immediately pelted him with stingers. The poison quickly spread through the monster's body. It froze in place, and then another hornet finished it off. Reika wasn't at all surprised, and MC asked if she was okay. He immediately noticed that she was awakened and quite strong. It turns out there were such people here too. He told her that it was better not to fight now, but to take refuge in the shelter. He quickly said goodbye to her and ran off, and she watched him go, quietly calling him a monster in Japanese. While MC was on his way to another shelter, he thought the gate had disappeared. Although they had suffered a loss in strength, this was still a good result for a fight against werewolves. Besides, he had acquired a new skill, the Phantom Labyrinth. Now he needed to help the others. Suddenly, a loud howl echoed throughout the island. Yule froze in place, realizing it was the boss. He didn't know what this monster was planning, but if the squad members encountered it now, they would be finished. He decided to act differently, telling the hornets to split up first and help those in the shelter, and summoned the sphere, deciding to use the boss of the labyrinth, Vespa. She responded to her master's call and emerged from her cocoon. Right now, in the port area, the villagers were hiding, afraid to make a sound, and Do-hyun was nearby. He nervously clenched his teeth, as he thought he shouldn't take on something he couldn't handle, otherwise he could die. It turned out he was facing the gate boss. Seeing how he was destroying ships like this, it became clear that his goal was to prevent the villagers from leaving the island. In that case, even if he died, the only thing he could do was buy as much time as possible. The monster was about to attack when the fisherman decided to flee, and its attention switched to them. Noticing this, Do-hyun rudely called out to the werewolf and told it to look straight ahead. It seems he'd spoiled it too much. His skill, Furious Taunt, activated, causing the monster to become enraged and immediately hit him, throwing him several meters away. He hit a bus and fell, then the werewolf ran towards him and lifted him off the ground by his neck. Do-hyun thought he needed to buy himself time to save the villagers. Feeling excruciating pain, he wondered why he'd changed so much. If he'd been the same, he would have been hiding in a safe place long ago. With Yule's appearance, when they began actively closing the gates, he understood what it meant to serve in the rescue squad. When he dealt with the monsters, a married couple approached him and sincerely thanked him for saving their son. He was very pleased to receive gratitude, to see the results of his efforts. He had never experienced this feeling before. He pulled out a knife, stabbed the monster in the arm, and it finally let go, tossing it aside. The werewolf pounced on him again, this time wanting to devour him. And just when Do-hyun thought he was finished, Yule appeared. He created a magic circle beneath them, which transported them to the dungeon. Do-hyun and the werewolf looked around in surprise, trying to comprehend what had just happened, and the MC said, "The new skill, allowing you to drag someone into the labyrinth without using a sphere, was much better than he expected." Do-hyun turned towards the voice, and Yule smirked, noting that he looked lousy. The guy asked in surprise, "Did he really create this?" He answered him vaguely, "Who knows, but now he needs to rest." He injected a potion into his neck, and he lost consciousness and fell, and he said that it was both a potion and a sedative. He would feel better after he got some sleep. He looked at the werewolf and asked, "He's the boss here, right?" He was sorry, but they were switching players, and from now on, instead of his subordinate, he would be the opponent. Meanwhile, Gangmu and Sungjae continued to fend off the monster's attacks. Gangmu's hands were shaking, and his legs were no longer obeying him. Now even Sungjae was barely holding on. Another monster pounced on him. He wanted to block the blow, but it simply knocked the shield out of his hands, and he had to use his sword. He thought that he gave it his all in every training, but apparently he didn't have enough time to become truly strong. Two monsters attacked him at once. He already thought it was the end, but everything worked out. Vespa arrived to their aid in time. She decapitated them with one kick, then went to help Sungjae. She released a stinger and pierced the monster. Gangmu was simply shocked. She defeated the werewolf in an instant. He asked out loud what kind of creature it was, and she turned to him and simply smiled silently, then headed to another shelter. Sungjae was impressed. He approached his comrade and noted that they had just been saved by a monster. Had it really already died or something? Gangmu thought for a moment and told him that was probably not the case. Meanwhile, the fight had begun. The werewolf made a dash, and MC thought he was definitely the strongest boss he'd ever faced. Moreover, he attacks while avoiding all the trap switches, meaning his senses and intelligence are quite good. Of course, he's not the one activating the mechanisms here. The fact that he's actively dodging the traps means he's focusing all his attention on them. Dodging the blow, he ran along the wall, thereby avoiding the monster, and ran further down the corridor. The werewolf turned and gave chase, but immediately stepped on a trap and caused an explosion that blew out one wall. In some places, the werewolf's fur was scorched, and he even lost one eye. Yule said it was good that he avoided traps, But they weren't the only danger here. He used the Dragon Flame Heart Destroyer technique and pierced the monster's body with a spear. The werewolf let out a final scream and then collapsed to the floor. MC breathed a sigh of relief and thought that since the gate and the boss were disabled, all that remained was to finish off those who had strayed from the pack. It would soon be over. Meanwhile, members of the monitoring department arrived at the administration building. A woman knocked on the branch manager's office, saying that they were actively searching for him at headquarters. There was no answer. She turned to her colleague and said that he wasn't answering at all. So what should they do? He told her to just come in and check, and she doubted it. He had told them not to barge in like that without asking. He reminded her of the current situation and told her to just come in. She nervously opened the door and looked inside, apologizing to the manager. She disappeared behind the door. The guy lit a cigarette and thought that this time he really went too far. And yet, they say, everything turned out without casualties, so maybe the resignation will put an end to all this. Suddenly, a loud scream from his colleague was heard from the office. He immediately went inside and asked what happened. The woman fell to the floor in fear. She pointed at the manager and exclaimed that he was dead. The brutal battle against the werewolves raged all night. This desperate struggle finally came to an end, just as it began to dawn. But immediately on the heels of this victory, a completely new crisis arose. After hearing the news of Seokyeon's death, Yul went to the office to see for himself. The guy from the monitoring department asked, "He doesn't think a werewolf did this to him, does he?" He noted that the crime scene was too clean for a monster attack. Besides, Seokyeon was a B-rank hunter. He could easily deal with a couple of werewolves on his own. The guy noted that this indicated a human, but who could it be? MC suggested that, judging by how neatly his fingers were cut off, it was highly likely the work of a hired killer. And in his mind, he added, what's worse, whoever did it, they were skilled enough to leave no evidence. But when it comes to eliminating an awakened, using mana is simply necessary, and he noticed traces of this mana on his body. He told the guy that the monitoring department would be incredibly busy soon, so he would first give him an urgent task, have him get him the island's visitor logs for the last week. Meanwhile, Reika had a dream about her past. She was brought to the head of the family, and he, calling her by her name, Sanagi Mika, said that he would overlook her failure this time only because of her past achievements. Let her not even think about freedom and not allow herself any emotions. Her only purpose in life is to serve him, the head of this family. Let her think of nothing else. There will be no second warning. Reika's eyes widened and she jumped out of bed. Coming to her senses, she noted that a lot of time had passed since she last had a dream. She would gladly do without returning to this memory. Time passed, and a worker from the monitoring department came to Yul's office and informed him that rumors had already begun to spread among the locals. MC noted that information about Seokyeon would have spread sooner or later anyway. The problem is, they suspended all ferry service for several days, so people's discontent is growing. How serious is it? He replied with a smile that everything was under control for now. And what's more, the news of the department head's upcoming promotion to branch head had everyone excited. Yul noted that he was already acting as branch head, and the guy said, more importantly, they have a prime suspect. They just need to track her down. Did he really intend to pursue the killer alone? He replied that tracking targets was his forte. Besides, the rest of the staff was busy rebuilding the village. He left, and MC turned to the window and thought that no one cared about that incident now. The real problem was that every time he tried to corner the killer, she vanished into thin air. What kind of skill did she even have? Still, ultimately, it was only a matter of time. If the criminal replaced his tracking ability and went into hiding, then he would have to act personally. He sent his hornets on patrol. They flew around all day looking for the killer, and evening fell. Reika went for a walk to the port. Children playing ran towards her. A boy did not notice her and collided with her, causing him to fall. Then she crouched down next to him and asked if he was okay. She was sorry that she hit him. He laughed and told her that everything was fine. He did not look around and crashed right into her. She noticed that he was a very energetic boy, after which he returned to his friends, and watching them, she became upset. For someone like her, whose life since childhood was connected with killing, such memories simply do not exist. She told herself not to dare envy them. She knew perfectly well that she would never be able to be free, so there was no use harboring any feelings. She needed to fully focus on completing the mission. Night fell. She was standing by the water and preparing for something, and just at that moment, a hornet flew by and noticed her. Hearing the bug approaching, she immediately killed it and thought, this beast definitely belongs to that person. And suddenly, Yul's voice was heard behind her. He called her Natsume Aya and said that they finally met. Of course, he knows perfectly well that this is not her real name. Reika hid something and noted that he recognized her instantly. How did he even manage to track her down so quickly? He answered her that he had no right to reveal his methods. He could simply say that nothing could escape his sight. She frowned and said that it was simply impossible, and when she drew her sword, he smiled nervously and asked her to wait. Can't she at least give him a chance to catch his breath? He literally ran all the way here. She rushed at him anyway. He quickly drew his weapon and repelled her attack, noting that she had no escape route left. Why doesn't she just give up without a fight? He has a few questions he wants answered. A thick shadow appeared under her feet. She fell into it and disappeared, and he thought, so this is what skill she used to hide from him until now? A shadow appeared behind him. She jumped out of it and pounced on him, but he reacted quickly, dodged and jumped behind her, striking back. After that, he thought, if she had to materialize from the darkness to strike, then counterattacking would not be difficult. She was pushed back by his blow. She looked at her hand and thought that this man really was strong, as she assumed. Just from parrying his blows, her hand went completely numb. She cannot waste a second on hesitation. She asked, he said that she has no way back, right? He is absolutely right, which means she has only one way out. She took out a conch shell, blew into it, and a loud sound was heard. He immediately rushed to attack and thought that he had no idea what she was planning, but he had to neutralize her before things got too complicated. Suddenly, tentacles emerged from under the water, grabbed Yule, and the system notified him of the Kraken encounter counter. MC stared at the system window in shock and wondered what kind of artifact this was. Could this thing really awaken the Kraken? He asked her if she was planning to summon some kind of monster and escape. Was she? This only added a couple of questions she would have to answer. He was already starting to think about how to get out of this situation. Fighting off those tentacles with brute force alone would be difficult, so he decided to summon Vespa and ordered her to subdue this woman. These words, he released a sphere from which a creature burst forth. It rushed forward and lunged at the enemy. MC, who was clutched by a huge tentacle, shouted, she couldn't have gone far. She had to head for the nearest forest. Then he was suddenly thrown upward, lifted off the ground. The protagonist gritted his teeth and muttered, now he needs to somehow get out of here. Why is this monster so resilient? He raised his weapon and began striking the tentacle. The next second, the Kraken yanked him aside and pulled him underwater. The protagonist thought he didn't plan to fight it now, but it seems like it's asking for it, huh? He glanced at the huge glowing eyes underwater, and a thought flashed through his mind. It must awaken. The weapon flashed in his hand, and the system announced, a unique effect has been activated, evolution into a form that matches the wielder's will. The next second, he unleashed a series of strikes using his horns, a wave crest. Rank rare, attack 150 to 210, durability 70 out of 70. Unique effects, deals 20% additional hurricane damage using water, and each strike adds a sonic wave attack. At that moment, Reika rose slightly from the ground, turned sharply, dodged the blow, and jumped to the side. She thought, what is this? She didn't even notice the enemy approaching. Aside from its appearance, it was different from other wasps. The creature was rushing inexorably toward her. Reika drew her weapon and struck, blocking the attack. The next second, she caught the movement of a sharp wing and thought, her attacks are faster and more powerful than she expected. She wanted to eliminate her pursuers before leaving, but now it was more important to get out of here. At that moment, the creature activated silent perception. A powerful aura spread around her in a wave, and Reika, flying back, thought in shock. A killing skill, and a skill that erases presence. Where did the monster get that? She gripped the hilt of her blade tighter, and turning away, glanced at Vespa, standing behind her. At that moment, she turned and smiled, looking at it. Reika gripped the blade even more confidently and said, don't underestimate people. With these words, she rushed into the attack, concentrating energy in her weapon. The next second, a sharp pain pierced her heart. She dropped to all fours, clutching her chest, and thought, she can't breathe, so suddenly, her body feels like it's burning. This sensation, poison. Her face covered in sweat, she sighed heavily, closed her eyes, and the thought flashed, this is the end. At that moment, MC put his hand on Vespa's head and said, hey brat, he told me to just neutralize it. Vespa looked at him in surprise, and he thought, feeding her various monsters, criminals, and awakened ones to make her stronger was a good idea. But the problem was that her ego had grown just as rapidly. He held his hand out in front of her and ordered her to stop. Reika, breathing heavily, said, did he seriously kill the Kraken? The protagonist just smiled and replied, no, he just escaped from it. He landed a good hit, but it's hard to see underwater, and it's hard to breathe there. He still has a chance to kill it, but right now, the priority is catching her. He stood right in front of her. She looked at him and said that she had nothing to say to him, even if he caught her. He closed his eyes and replied, that's what he thought. He didn't want to resort to this, but he has no choice if he wants to finish quickly. Then the system reported, pheromone secretion is increasing. He adjusted his hair, smiled, and asked, so how is it? Do you feel like cooperating? Reika looked at him silently, then muttered through clenched teeth, damn it. The next second, her heart started beating faster. She thought, stop. Her heart was pounding even faster than before. Could this be another kind of poison? No, her heart was beating, but her soul suddenly felt surprisingly calm. She opened her eyes wide and thought, she would never have been able to truly escape anyway. In that case, it would be better to trust him. No, not him, but there was no choice. Then she dropped the weapon and said, she will tell him everything she knows. Just let him free her from these bonds. The protagonist smiled and said, it seems she has a lot of problems under her belt. Let her just cooperate with him. He will help her. Meanwhile, at Overcross headquarters, Radio Palace, Junwan strode forward with determination, his subordinate following behind, clutching his helmet. He said, excellent work on today's gate raid. Junwan replied, more importantly, have you heard from that assassin yet? The subordinate said, he heard the director's mission was successful, but she hasn't contacted them directly. Junwan added, Perhaps she died somewhere or was captured. The subordinate cautiously remarked. If she fell into that man's hands, isn't there a risk that information about their order will leak out? He replied, it's fine. She knows better than anyone that her words won't change anything. If she were caught, she would simply end her life. Then he frowned, turned, and added, consequently, the biggest problem now is that Yule's influence is growing much faster than they expected. With these words, he looked at the TV screen where the news was broadcast. He muttered, he should have just sat there quietly and played boss. He didn't understand why he was so eager to climb the corporate ladder. Taking out his phone, he added, he really was an annoying insect. Several days had passed since all those incidents. First, the Seokyeon murder case was closed. The culprit had disappeared without a trace. After that, Yule was appointed acting head of the branch. He immediately took disciplinary action against the hunters involved in Seokyeon's corruption, as well as paying bonuses to hardworking employees. Now he looked ahead and said, so he means that the Tokugawa family which her clan serves is closely connected to Junwon, right? That's why they entrusted her with this murder. Reika stood nearby, closed her eyes and replied, yes, that's right. The protagonist tapped his finger on the table and said, he thought Junwon was just a cunning fox stalking him, but he's gotten completely insolent. Then he looked at her and asked, but what exactly did the Tokugawa family plan to do with the Kraken? She replied, she only knew that it was raised as a test subject, to strengthen the family's influence. The protagonist thought, strengthen influence? Did they really want to use it as a bargaining chip in international negotiations? No, now was not the time to dwell on this. The main thing was that the Kraken had awakened, and the island's inhabitants were in danger. Then he said, Reika, he was helping her not only because of their agreement, but also because she hesitated before awakening the Kraken. She quietly thanked him. He rose from his seat and added, of course, even if she acted on the Tokugawa clan's orders, it did not absolve her of guilt for the crime. Therefore he would help her, and punish her at the same time. Reika replied, she would accept any punishment he deemed necessary. He looked at her and said, then from now on she must follow his orders and save as many people as possible. That was the punishment he was assigning her. She paused for a moment and then said, a punishment that required the complete opposite of the life she had led. She understood. Clenching her fist, she added from now on, she would follow his orders and save lives. The protagonist smiled and remarked, he liked how quickly she made decisions. Then for starters they should change her name, the first step to true freedom. She replied, yes, she had no objections. The next second, Sungjae burst into the room and shouted, branch manager, he needs to come down immediately. He asked, what is it? He answered, the Kraken has appeared. At that moment, the news reported, a Kraken had been spotted off the coast of Ulleungdo Island. The government was calling an emergency meeting. The entire team gathered in front of the TV, and then Sungjae said, it's not just the news. Even people on the street are talking about the Kraken. The protagonist thought he planned to act quickly, but the Kraken became active sooner than he expected. Then Sungjae scratched his neck and added, yes, and anyway, there really was a Kraken in all the surrounding waters. But who identified it as a Kraken and reported it? The protagonist folded his arms and said, if it wasn't one of the islanders, then the answer is obvious. At that moment, Yunwon appeared on the TV screen and announced, they did receive a request from the government to destroy the Kraken, but they've already informed us that they can't take it on. They have too many responsibilities on the mainland. So, besides, there are already capable branch managers on Ulleungdo, right? Still, if he requests support, they're willing to do their best to help. Sungjae asked, is that him? The MC smiled, looking at him and remarked, he's smart. He replied, he doesn't know the details, but he was involved with Seokyeon. And yet, there are still too many unanswered questions. The protagonist waved his hand and said, stop making things more complicated than necessary. They just have to remember one thing. If they act the way he wants, he will control them forever. He took a few steps forward, and Sungjae asked, then what is he going to do? He answered, it's simple. They will not do what he expects of them. Everyone, get ready. The guy turned around and asked, for what? The protagonist extended his hand forward and asked in response, what do he think? They are going to hunt the Kraken. The next second, the team members shouted, what? They? The protagonist calmly put his hands in his pockets and asked, who else will do this? They don't have time to sit and wait for other hunters. And also Dohyun, it's his time to shine. He raised his index finger and smiled, looking at it. Meanwhile, sharks were circling in the sea. One of them grabbed a fish, piercing it with sharp fangs. At that moment, the Kraken burst from the depths and sharply grabbed both sharks with its tentacles. He squeezed them with all his strength and muttered, the man who gave him these scars will pay for this humiliation. The next second, a pungent smell began to creep across the water. The Kraken frowned. What the heck? Meanwhile, on the shore, Sungjae asked, is he sure they can handle it themselves? The MC shrugged. He has no idea. They'll find out when they engage in battle. Sungjae looked at him silently, and the protagonist suddenly chuckled. Relax. He's joking. There are more of these things here than they need. Then he opened the drawer and added, "Look, this is practically made for today." Sanjay's eyes widened in surprise, examining the contents. Inside were legendary rank sea dragon boots. They allowed the wearer to run on water. Nearby rested a rare rank deep sea orb. When activated, it granted the ability to breathe underwater. Sanjay exhaled. Did he buy this, manager? The protagonist shook his head. No. The package arrived this morning from a place called Kingdom of Mages, from someone named Ian Graham. Sanjay gasped. Kingdom of Mages? Ian? The protagonist asked. Does he know who that is? He nodded confidently. Of course he does. Kingdom of Mages is the best guild for developing items, and Ian is a mysterious genius mage. Even the items their rescue department uses are created by him. The protagonist slightly raised an eyebrow. Is he that famous? And Sanjay asked in response, but why did he send this to him, manager? He replied, the note said that he hoped it would help. Signed, Fan. The next second, Do-hyun shouted, Manager. MC turned to him, and he blurted out, he told me that today was supposed to be his moment of glory. The protagonist calmly said, hey, he's doing great. And at that moment, Do-hyun dipped his hand into the water and activated the stench skill. He immediately howled. In what universe is this considered glory? The protagonist smiled and said, he told him, the only ones who can lure the Kraken are them. This is more than a worthy contribution. At the same time, he thought, he would have preferred a safer approach, but their only option, the Vespa, is broken. The method is crude, but if they continue to spread such a strong stench in the water, the Kraken will never be able to ignore them. Sanjay covered his face with his hand and grumbled, where did he even get such a skill? He is simply the embodiment of a trash strike. Do-hyun barked, shut up, as if the Kraken would actually come because of this. Before he could finish speaking, a huge tentacle burst out of the water and rushed straight at him. He stared at it in horror, then turned his gaze to the manager and shouted, branch manager. Backing away, he began to rise to his feet, screaming at the top of his lungs. The next second, MC managed to catch him and barked, everyone, get into battle positions. The team instantly grabbed their weapons. The protagonist firmly declared, they are starting the hunt for the Kraken right now. The next second, the Kraken swung a huge tentacle, and MC barked, don't just stand there, help the rest of the squad. He swung his weapon, attacking the tentacle in front of him. He knew that outside the water, the wave's force is weaker, so cutting it in one blow won't work. Then he shouted, rescue squad, everyone attack. Do-hyun yelled, everyone must follow the branch manager and slash at the tentacles. The team began firing powerful cannonballs, launching arrows engulfed in energy straight at the monster's tentacle. The next second, the tentacles rushed towards them, and someone shouted, now. At the same time, everyone began to strike. The protagonist gritted his teeth and thought, the Kraken, or whatever it was after all, just a giant octopus. So if they could cut off its tentacles, it would be helpless prey. He continued to strike, and then one of the squad members shouted, pointing forward, it's the head. His colleague asked in surprise, what? He pointed. The creature's head appeared. At that moment, the Kraken actually lifted its head above the water, and one of the rescuers shouted, we can't let it go under. We need to destroy the head while it's still visible. MC frowned and thought, strange, he exposed his head so easily? The next second, he felt a sharp surge of energy and yelled, raise your shields immediately. A powerful stream of ink erupted from the holes in the Kraken's head. It burned through everything in its path. The protagonist managed to jump back at the last moment. Screams were heard all around. At that moment, Do-hyun, gritting his teeth, shouted, his leg. He needs to hit the leg. The protagonist barked, healer. He immediately responded, he's already coming. The next second, the protagonist took off, thinking, now that the wounded have appeared, there's no time at all. He rushed forward, dodging another tentacle. Gritting his teeth, he mentally muttered, of course. He noticed how the tentacles began to approach the healer and Do-hyun, and his blood ran cold. The monster was deliberately hitting the wounded. He thought, however, he has someone he can trust. At that moment, Gangmu, concentrating energy throughout his entire body, stopped the tentacle with a roar. His muscles bulged, the veins in his neck stretched, as if they were about to burst. Someone shouted, frowning, the branch manager. The protagonist stepped forward and muttered, you don't have to shout, he already knows everything. Then he leaped to attack, rapidly approaching the monster's head. He sharply dodged another tentacle and shouted, Sanjay. The next second, Reika emerged from the bend of a tentacle. She positioned her weapon so that MC could push off with her legs. He flew further, rapidly approaching the monster's head. Even if he tried to escape, it was already too late, flashed through his mind. With these thoughts, he landed right on the creature's head and plunged his weapon next to the Kraken's eye. The next second, he jumped back, clutching the hilt of the blade and said, hey, he remembers his face, right? He looked into the Kraken's bright red eyes, and the monster said, he summoned it. This time he will definitely kill it. With these words, the Kraken grabbed the protagonist with its tentacles and began to rapidly dive underwater. The rest of the squad cried out in alarm. The director, but the protagonist merely grinned and thought, indeed, even an octopus would remember the face of the one who struck him. It seemed he had dragged him here because he wanted to finish him off. That suited him just fine. The squad's endurance was already at its limit, and it would only be a matter of time before more victims appeared. Besides, there would be no prying eyes underwater, and thanks to the Abyssal Pearl, breathing was no problem, which meant he was ready to finish this alone. The next second, he used Mana Burst. A bright flash broke the tentacle's grip, and the protagonist thought, now he could unleash his true power. At that very moment, the Kraken rushed towards him, cutting through the water with its heavy tentacles. The protagonist darted to the side, dodging the blow, and cursed silently. The problem wasn't just that strange ink laser. No matter how much his restraints had weakened underwater, this was still Kraken territory. Dodging and attacking at the same time would be difficult. He'd like to wear his opponent down a bit longer, force him to waste his energy, but now was not the time for tricks. A guaranteed victory was the most important thing. At that moment, the ink laser streaked toward him in a blinding streak. The protagonist thrust his arms forward, forming a dense sphere of energy, and in the blink of an eye, he found himself inside it. He leaped forward, and the ink laser followed him, slamming into the barrier. Water gushed out of the sphere, and he was already racing through it without slowing down. He snapped his fingers, and the system responded immediately. The Atlas grip trap had been activated. The Kraken's tentacles squeezed between two walls. The monster twitched, flailing its limbs nervously, trying to escape. The next second, the system issued an alarm. Attention, the labyrinth's durability is rapidly declining. The training labyrinth's durability is 97%. The protagonist glanced briefly at the system window and thought, 3% in such a short moment. He had to finish this as quickly as possible. Fortunately, the monster had few tentacles left, and it was already seriously wounded. That would be enough. Then, looking ahead, it said, "Come out." Now it's her turn. The next second, a trident shot forward, cutting through the water, and a Vespa leaped into the attack. MC thought, from now on, the race against time begins. New tentacles kept bursting out of the sphere, and the labyrinth was rapidly filling with water. The protagonist gritted his teeth and delivered a sharp blow to another tentacle. Vespa also attacked the monster from various sides, cutting through the water with rapid dashes. The Kraken, remaining outside the sphere, continued to fire ink lasers. The next second, the system issued a new message. The training labyrinth's durability is 69%. There are 16 monsters remaining in the labyrinth. The labyrinth will spontaneously collapse if its durability drops below 60%, or if all the monsters are destroyed. MC gripped the handle of his weapon and thought, no matter how hard he tried to protect the labyrinth, he couldn't stop this rapid decline in durability. Every blow, every movement only spurred the destruction. He noticed an approaching tentacle and abruptly jumped aside. He thought, in the end, to minimize damage to the labyrinth, he would have to wait and strike only for certain. The weapon in his hands flared with a bright light, and he delivered a precise blow to the tentacle, plunging the blade deep. Then, he activated the Dragon King Cleave technique, a wave that ripped apart the dragon. Energy rolled along the blade and surged forward, tearing through the monster's flesh. He thought, just a little more, just a little more. Another tentacle darted towards him, but he only grinned. If he could hold out just a little longer, that would be enough. He smiled, looking at the monster, and then turned his gaze to Vespa and mentally noted, well done. Then he aimed the weapon at the tentacle and said, he was sure she had managed to inflict quite a few stabs, but due to its enormous size, the effect was only now taking effect. After a brief pause, he added, but it stings quite badly, right? At that moment, a sharp pain pierced the Kraken's heart. The monster spasmed, darted from side to side, and howled. What had it done to his body? He can't breathe. He needs to breathe. He needs to live. If he can't breathe underwater, he abruptly lunged for the surface, thinking of only one thing. He needed to get to dry land. At that moment, the rescue team remained on the shore. Sonjae, directing healing energy to Do-hyun's leg, asked, does he think the branch manager will be okay? He replied, a man like him will find a way to survive on his own. Gangwoo added, no matter how strong the branch manager is, the Kraken still has the advantage underwater, doesn't it? Someone quietly agreed. He thought so. Still, they couldn't just dive in and chase after it. The next second, everyone's heads shot up in surprise and looked towards the sea. A huge Kraken emerged from the water with a roar. Gangwoo shouted, it's the Kraken! Everyone get ready again. Sonjae exhaled. Did the branch manager make it surface? Do-hyun barked. Just raise your shields, it's coming! The Kraken then fired an ink laser. A black streak rushed forward, burning through the air. Sonjae cursed, damn it, what about the village? Do-hyun resolutely looked ahead and shouted, he'll attract its attention with his skills, and the ranged soldiers must cut off that octopus's head. One of the rescue squad members suddenly froze and shouted in surprise, wait a minute, isn't that the branch manager over there? He pointed his finger toward the water, and at that moment, the protagonist actually broke out of the sphere. He thought he had no strength or mana left. This was his final blow. Concentrating the last of his energy into his weapon, he muttered, he knows the Kraken is out of its mind right now because of the poison, but if it's going to die, let it do so quietly. With these words, he lunged at the monster, cutting through the water with a swift dash. The Kraken turned its blazing gaze on him. The protagonist thought, he knew it, a simple blow wouldn't pierce it. But he wasn't just going to hit hard, he was going to strike precisely. The weapon sank into the monster's body, piercing the flesh, and at that very moment, a wave rolled across the water. He thought, however, if he doesn't end this right here, the Kraken will rampage until it dies. If that happens, not only the rescuers and crew members will suffer enormous losses, the inhabitants of Olongdo Island will also be in trouble. He won't let that happen. As long as he has the strength, he will protect everyone. With these words, he let out a loud cry and yanked the weapon forward, piercing the monster's body. A wave of energy rolled along the blade, tearing through flesh, and the water around him was stained with dark streaks. The others froze, their mouths open, unable to believe what was happening. And then the system message flashed before their eyes. Quest complete. Congratulations, he defeated the Kraken. MC collapsed to the surface of the water, breathing heavily, barely staying afloat. Do-hyun exhaled. He really did bring down the Kraken, Sungjae immediately added. But the most important thing now is to save him first. The protagonist rolled over and calmly said, "The weather today is simply wonderful." The members of the rescue team shouted that they would soon go down and pull him out. He propped himself up on his elbow and replied, "He's fine. First, we need to assess the damage in the village." Then he looked up and noticed a helicopter in the sky. He frowned. A helicopter? It must have been the television. He adjusted his hood, thinking, in any case, no matter how hard he tried, he had failed to protect the labyrinth. He glanced briefly at the system window. The durability of the training labyrinth had dropped below 60%. Destruction would soon occur. The thought flashed through his mind. Did this mean he would become a labyrinth architect without a labyrinth itself? And then another notification came. He blinked in surprise. Notification? The system responded. The labyrinth architect can purchase or create a new labyrinth. Quest offer. Hidden legacy quest. Forgotten civilizations. Reward for success. Labyrinth materials and skills gained at each stage of the challenge. Penalty for failure. A permanent ban from this quest. Accept the offer? He paused for a moment, then smiled and answered decisively, "Of course." Sometime later, the news reported, this afternoon, the news service received footage of the very moment the Kraken was destroyed on Ulleungdo Island. This incident was considered a shining example of the true combat prowess of the Bureau's hunters. The acting head of the Yule branch was singled out in particular, given a huge role in the operation. The internet was already buzzing with anticipation of his next move. At that moment, Junwan, unable to restrain himself, threw his desk against the wall. He was breathing heavily, clenching his fists, and furiously muttered, "What the hell? This lousy little bug." His subordinate carefully said, "Director, please calm down." Junwan glared at him, then grabbed him by the neck and abruptly lifted him. He thought he could remain calm in a situation like this. It was clear to anyone. This guy possessed S-rank strength. This meant he posed a real threat to their guild. Someone with real national power had appeared. After the Kraken was destroyed, the administration building was literally inundated with gifts from grateful residents. MC had never seen the people of Ulleungdo look so peaceful. For the first time in a long time, he truly felt proud to be a member of the rescue squad. Soon the city held its first major festival in years. The streets were decorated with lanterns, music was everywhere, people laughed and shared stories. It seemed like the island was finally returning to normal. That evening, the protagonist stood on the roof, breathing in the cool air and admiring the city lights. Reika quietly approached him and asked, "Are you sure you don't want to go down and look around today?" He smiled slightly and replied, he'd already seen enough of the festival. Tomorrow it's back to work, so it's best to just rest today. A pause hung in the air and then he calmly added, "By the way, she'd had plenty of opportunities to escape in the past few days, so why didn't she?" She closed her eyes and quietly answered, "Because she made him a promise. And also, she wants to become as strong as him, to earn the right to her own freedom." He looked at her in surprise, then returned his gaze to the festival lights and said calmly, "Freedom comes with choice and responsibility. So this path will not be easy. But if she is truly ready to see it through and not give up, let her stay by his side, since their promises are still valid." She looked up at him and quietly thanked him. After that, the protagonist smiled slightly and added, "The only problem is that starting tomorrow he will have to deal with paperwork. He needs to get back to quests and labyrinths as soon as possible." "Didn't she say she possessed all the skills of an assassin?" She nodded. "Correct. She had inherited almost everything." He smiled. "Is that so? Then she should do him a favor." The next morning, the worker placed a tall stack of documents on the table and said calmly, "Branch manager, starting today, all of this is expected to be processed on time. And please don't forget about the afternoon meeting. If he tries to escape again, he knows what will happen, right? The amount of paperwork he'll have to sort through will simply double." After these words, the worker closed the door behind him. Sometime later, Reika appeared in the room. Taking the documents in her hand, she wondered, is he really dealing with all these documents and even solving problems on the spot? And yet, she hadn't expected the stack to be so huge. Meanwhile, the protagonist thought he felt bad dumping all the work on her. But right now, this was much more important. He stood in a dungeon in the abandoned city of Ether. A system window appeared in front of him, stating, "This is the first test. The goal is to retrieve the moonstone from the tower. Time limit, 2 hours." The protagonist looked ahead and thought, the tower is definitely here. He moved forward and after a while stopped near the stone. A thought flashed through his head. So this is what it is, the moonstone. Isn't it lying there too openly? The protagonist reached out and thought, well, the first trial is usually just a tutorial anyway. The next second, a huge magical symbol appeared behind him. He turned around abruptly. A huge stone golem then began to emerge from the symbol. The MC pulled out his weapon and said, "Yeah, who would let him take that just like that?" The golem took a heavy step forward, and the protagonist thought, he doesn't know how many trials there will be, but he'll pass them all in a jiffy. Meanwhile, in Yeongdongpo, Seoul, a partner was sitting in a specialized van. He looked at the monitor screen and asked, "Maybe I should go get some coffee." Senior, Jungmin, sitting next to him, replied, "There's no coffee shop nearby." The partner said, "Oh well, there's no one in the park in this weather anyway." He's just running away quickly. Then he looked at the screen in surprise and, turning to Jungmin, asked, "Is someone approaching the gate?" Jungmin asked again, "What?" At that moment, Ricardo Moreno, hiding behind a black robe, said, "Double barrier." He approached the gate and added, "The device is designed to prevent illegal entry into the gate being raided. It may have been effective in the barbaric times when the gate first appeared, but now it's nothing more than a formality." Ricardo looked at the special device in his hand and added, "Of course. It'll be easier for everyone to smash this." He then threw the device straight at the gate, causing a powerful explosion. He said, "To be expected from a country that couldn't even close a 6th-tier gate. Okay, no need to delay. From this moment, the treasure hunt begins." He walked forward, followed by the other scavengers. After a while, they arrived at a tower in ancient times. On the 2nd floor, the monster's enormous fist was approaching the protagonist, but MC resolutely ran forward, successfully outpacing the enemy's blow. He swung his weapon, in which he had concentrated energy, and delivered a powerful blow, a scarlet lotus. The enormous hand shattered, and the system reported, "The clay of eternity is crumbling." The protagonist had passed the 2nd trial. He stood on the cracked floor and thought. He tried to walk as quickly as possible, but a day had already passed since entering the tower. How many trials were left? He wanted to finish everything as soon as possible. It wasn't that he didn't trust the team, but he was restless. He had been away from them for too long. The protagonist frowned and looked ahead. The thought flashed through his mind. Such anxiety in itself is a problem. So much had happened recently. Surely nothing more would happen, right? He should focus on the next trial. The protagonist walked forward, stretching his shoulder. Meanwhile, his partner looked at the monitor screen and, seeing a group of scavengers, asked, "What the hell are they doing?" Jungmin barked, "Dungeon capture. He must contact headquarters immediately." But then he turned around in surprise and noticed one of the garbage men holding a knife to his partner's neck. Elena Bellegarde put the gun to Jungmin's throat and said, "The fun is just beginning. They can't let this happen. No spoilers, okay?" Jungmin turned slightly and thought, "A black skull tattoo." He said, "Garbage men, an international criminal guild blacklisted worldwide." Jungmin smiled and said he'd heard those guys only worked in foreign backwaters. Surprisingly brave, dealing with the consequences of interfering in the affairs of foreign government officials. Elena replied, "Of course, they wouldn't want to make a big deal out of it. But they always need money. Besides, isn't the administration a rabble of lowlifes? Who even cares what happens to such trash?" Jungmin asked. "So they came to Korea to extort these lowlifes?" Elena looked away and replied, "Apparently, they don't care about them. They're interested in what they were hiding." With these words, she glanced at the monitor. A system window appeared next to her, and a voice came from it. "Elena, their situation is already resolved," she replied. He finished faster than she expected. "Did he capture everyone?" Scavenger Edgar Myers replied. "No, that was pathetic. A guild fighting against a common minotaur. So he simply burned them all along with the monsters." Elena asked, "What about the target?" Edgar replied, "They say he's on vacation." Perfect timing. She said, "It must be nice to live the easy life of a VIP. So should they retreat for now?" He replied, "No, stick to the plan." At that moment, the guild members were kneeling, their hands bound, explosive devices in their mouths. Edgar added, "At least one of them must know where the target lives." Scavenger Bruno Calista and Scavenger Ricardo stood before the hostages. Edgar continued, "As soon as they find the location, they will immediately send the coordinates. So let them be ready." Elena asked, "What should they do with those from the administration?" He answered, "The abilities of the Vanguard Department have low market value. It is better to eliminate any potential risks. They must kill them." Hearing this, Jungmin was surprised. Elena said, "It's a pity, but they heard the man. Nothing can be done. They themselves are to blame for being caught." The next second, his partner broke free from the fight and grabbed the attacker by the arms. He turned and shouted, "Senior!" The next second, Jungmin jumped up from his seat. He steered the chair towards Elena and, running to the monitor, thought, there is no way they can win in a direct fight. If he still dies, he will at least warn headquarters before leaving. He reached his hand toward the keyboard, while Elena looked at him with a smirk. She sharply thrust the gun into Jungmin's hand. He cried out, gritting his teeth, and thought. She grabbed both his hands at that moment. Elena said, she thinks he wanted to press the emergency button or something like that before he died, but he was too slow. Jungmin answered, he tried to press the emergency button, but there was one small detail she missed. She asked, which one? He answered, much to her regret, the button at the bottom. With these words, he sharply pressed the button under the table with his knee. The next second, all the screens in the room turned red. Jungmin said he did everything he could. Elena grabbed him, slamming him on the table, and said, he did well. There is nothing to regret now, right? She raised her weapon to strike. Meanwhile, MC stopped near the huge doors and thought, so this is the 10th test. He went inside and, moving down the corridor, said, judging by his posture, he is their boss? Across the room, Karhen Bellador, the Incubus King, sat on his throne. He said boss isn't the right word for him. He's merely the one who guards this labyrinth. Let him come and prove his worth. With that, Karhen rose from his seat and drew his weapon, shrouded in a powerful aura. The system announced, the final test, he must defeat the Incubus King, Karhen. MC gripped the hilt of his sword and said, the final boss after 130 hours. He could finally finish this. Sometime later, a group of scavengers were in the room. Elena said, even in this weather, there are an unimaginable number of people in the department store. So they're absolutely certain the target will be here? Ricardo replied, they said the target visits the local pharmacy on her days off. And according to the hacked pharmacy data, she comes around this time. Elena looked at him and said, but he said she wasn't here when he checked earlier. Will she even come today? He barked. She should shut up. What does she want him to do if no one knows for sure? They're only acting so urgently because of her. She doesn't know how to do anything except kill. Elena noticed he has a pretty sharp tongue. Then Edgar said, both of them, stop. The administration and the guild will be here soon, so they don't have much time. What did she do with that guy from her case? Elena answered, she pushed him into the security room. But why did he suddenly tell her to leave him alive? Edgar said, time is short. They need to extract the abilities of at least one more person, Elena. She said, she knows. The next second, an aura appeared around them, spreading throughout the space. Elena looked around and said, judging by the gazes she felt from this direction, there are about 10 of them, maybe even more, if you count the trash that doesn't sense them. Edgar said, for now, they can only hope that the target is among these awakened ones. Elena asked, will he be able to catch them all? He answered, it would be difficult to eliminate them quietly, so they will do it their own way. With these words, he placed his hand on Ricardo's shoulder. Meanwhile, the protagonist's fight continued. Karin used the skill Abyss of Darkness. He concentrated dark energy in his hands, and then there was an explosion, and a creature with long arms appeared from the darkness, reaching straight for the protagonist. MC began to swing his weapon and thought, an illusion skill? Several arms reached out to him from different sides, and he parried the blows one after another. The protagonist thought, this is different from a regular illusion skill. The attacks were heavy, as if they were all real. His stamina wouldn't last if he fought them individually. Even if he had to use all his strength right now, he had to take them all out at once. He swung his weapon again, gritting his teeth and sending a powerful stream of energy forward. The blow landed squarely on Karhin's chest, and a clot of blood erupted from his mouth. At that very moment, the system reported he had passed the final test. Karhin said he congratulated him. The protagonist looked at him in surprise. Karhin added, so he, too, had fulfilled his final order. The protagonist asked, so what were he in this city? He answered, nothing special. A city destroyed by the monster of the end, and he was just a knight carrying out his final order. He would give one piece of advice. The monster of the end is an entity that can appear anywhere, as long as the conditions for its existence are met. His world would be no exception. Karhin began to disappear. MC said, he has no idea what he's talking about, but he will remember the advice. The next second, Karhin vanished into thin air, and the heart of the labyrinth appeared before the protagonist. He stepped forward and thought. The location of the labyrinth's creation was imprinted in his mind when he became the labyrinth's designer. Now, using the heart of the labyrinth as the core, he only needed to visualize the labyrinth's plan in his mind. With these thoughts, he touched the heart of the labyrinth, and in that same second, he found himself in outer space, hovering above a magical symbol surrounded by several cubes. He smiled and said, this is just the beginning. Meanwhile, Reika was sitting at the computer. She glanced at the monitor screen and said, mobilization order. A bandit group has appeared in Yeongdongpo, so all hunters who receive the summons must go there, as if she could go. She thought, her skill allows her to copy appearances, but copying abilities and strength is impossible. Then she looked to the side and said, her phone has been ringing non-stop for some time. She doesn't plan to walk at that speed, right? The next second, a rift in space appeared next to her. The protagonist peeked out from it and asked, why is she overacting like that? He doesn't think he's ever seen her with such an expression, Reika said with relief. She's saved. After a while, Jung-hee looked at her wristwatch and said, when will he come? The next second, the MC appeared next to her and said, he's here. She screamed in fear. He asked, why is she so scared over nothing? Jung-hee put her hand to her chest and said, let him just start the conversation normally. He replied, he thought it was perfectly normal. And then one of the people present exclaimed, wow, is that really the hunter from Seoul? The others were also surprised. The Kraken Slayer? Wow, he looks different now. Jung-hee said, he's practically become a celebrity. Let him follow her. She will lead him to the waiting area. After a while, they walked forward. The protagonist said, be that as it may, how crazy are these scavengers to blow up a department store? Jung-hee handed him a folder of documents and replied, here, a skill core that can extract and grant abilities to hunters. It's a technology the scavengers recently acquired. The MC said, it seems they use it to make money, but does it have anything to do with the bandit attack? Jung-hee replied, it's because of the girl shown on the next page. The protagonist flipped the page. She added, an awakened one whose ability is kept secret by the administration. Codename, Omega. The protagonist looked at her in surprise and asked, what kind of ability is that? She replied, the ability to reverse time returns the target to the state they were in 5 seconds ago. The protagonist stared at her, stunned. What? That's absolutely superpowered. She replied, that's exactly why the scavengers are hunting her. It's unknown how they even found out about her. What's important right now is that they were trying to find her, even if it meant killing her guild members. And now they're in the same place. The The protagonist said, "Still, if they're taking hostages, that means they haven't found her yet, right?" Jung-hee stepped forward and said, "It looks like that, but they can't know for sure. Not only are various devices involved, but also the guild's hunters who have already entered the area." She hesitated. "Where is he going?" The protagonist asked. "What does she think?" She was indignant. "He can't act alone. They've already sent requests for support to hunters of the appropriate rank. They're currently assembling a team. As soon as they have it together." The MC waved his hand and said, "They know their reputation will suffer if civilians are hurt. That's why none of them have shown up yet." Jong-hee said, "Even so, going alone is—" Before she could finish speaking, Kwang-soo placed a hand on her shoulder and said, "He's right. First of all, he's sure this is a stressful time for him too, so he apologizes for calling him so suddenly, leader." The protagonist bowed and said, "They haven't seen each other for a long time, director." Meanwhile, Bruno said, "They shouldn't even think about retreating just because some bugs appeared. They won't spare anyone, even if they're not awakened." With these words, he glanced at the bodies. One of the hostages muttered, "The guild hunters didn't even stand a chance. They're dead." Bruno barked, "Let them sit quietly and do as they're told. They need to be taken to Elena." His subordinate pulled the body towards him and replied, he understood. Then Bruno approached the hostages and muttered. He was sick of having to babysit hostages. "Any more of those guild idiots coming?" the scavenger countered. "Wouldn't they be in trouble if a top guild showed up?" Bruno replied, "They won't come. The larger the organization, the more cautious they act, and only if there's a chance they can avoid losses. Why bother? They're probably too busy picking up loose change right under their noses. Let him relax. They need to focus on the job. He needs to keep an eye on the situation above, use his abilities below, while Bruno keeps an eye on the hostages. And of course, keep an eye out for whoever comes to get medicine for their mother, Omega." He looked at her and asked, "Why is she looking back?" He's talking to her. The next second, the protagonist jumped right at the scavenger. He landed, skidding to a stop on the ground. Bruno, clutching his head, sighed loudly and said, "It just seemed like the job was coming to an end. Those bugs again." MC replied, "You don't say anything. By bugs, he means himself, right?" He pointed the weapon he had concentrated his energy into at the enemy. Kwang-soo had said just before, "It's exactly as he says. The hunters from the top guilds are busy with other things, and the rest are having a hard time fighting the scavengers." This leads to his question. Does the protagonist think he can handle this alone? Jong-hee exclaimed in surprise. "The director?" The protagonist replied, "He wouldn't have come here if he couldn't." Kwang-soo stepped forward and said, "In that case, let him prove it. Let him show that everything he's achieved so far was real." Meanwhile, the protagonist recovered from Bruno's blow. He adjusted his grip on the weapon, swung for a punch, and the next second dodged the fist. He threw, "Does he like to swing his fists?" After that, he punched the enemy in the face and added, "He does too." At that moment, Bruno, whose face was being hit again and again, thought he heard that the Bureau's hunters were at best C or B rank, but this one surpassed him in every way. This guy is a hunter? The next second, he rushed in the opposite direction and thought, since it came to this, he was just using the hostages. He extended his hand towards them, and the next second, MC was there and swung his fist. Bruno screamed, "He's an idiot." The protagonist hit him with such force that Bruno's head sank into the ground, causing cracks. The hostages exchanged glances and whispered, "Is he really a hunter from the Bureau? He saw him online." Then MC turned around and said, "Omega." He sat down opposite her and added, "He still has unfinished business here. Could she please get the civilians outside?" She replied, she understood, and then added, she had only heard rumors, but he really is strong, Hunter Yule. At that moment, a voice came over the loudspeaker. Who gave him permission to touch the hostages? He didn't expect him to defeat Bruno. Apparently, celebrities are a different breed. Even if they are from the Bureau, it's an honor to meet him, Hunter Yule. Edgar added, "Let's put aside pleasantries. He needs to be punished for getting out of control." The next second, the device on Omega's neck glowed red. Edgar said, "Any hostage whose necklace starts beeping will explode and tear off his head. If Omega is among them, let him raise his hand. He will spare her life. As for the rest, what a pity. And they must return the hero who came to save them." Omega said, "Hunter, it looks like she is their target. She will step forward and, at least, try to stop the bombs." At that moment, her mother shouted, "Jian, it is too dangerous." The protagonist replied, "That is not necessary. He just received the signal. Everything is settled. Let them check their necks again." Omega was surprised. "Their necks?" She put her hand to the device, and it began to split, scattering into fine grains of sand. She exclaimed, "The bombs are disappearing. How is this possible?" The protagonist said, "They were lucky with the timing, but there is information that can only be obtained by becoming a hunter from the Bureau. In the modern era, there are two types of hunters, those who level up through the system, and those supported by the constellations. Hunters who draw power from powerful patrons. While most hunters rely on the system, Ricardo and his disciples utilized bomb-making abilities thanks to the support of a constellation. This structure allows for rapid growth depending on the patron. However, this ability is granted strictly by contract with the constellation. System skills activate regardless of the caster's status after initiation, but constellations immediately revoke all abilities as soon as an anomaly occurs. At that moment, in the dark forest, wasps attacked the scavengers. A scream came from one of their devices. They must respond. The scavenger threw down his radio and shouted, "Damn it, I shouldn't have left hostages with these idiots." Edgar thought the only bombs left were those destined to blow up the building during their escape. He expected the Bureau to dig up information on them. But how the hell did they find Ricardo Ricardo's disciples hiding in the forest? Did he bring reinforcements, or had they allied with the guild? At that moment, a multitude of enraged wasps surged forward and flew into the building. The scavengers screamed, "What kind of creatures are those?" Someone thought they were monsters. Then he shouted, "Sauger!" The creature behind him released a powerful stream of fire from its mouth. And at that moment, Elena scratched her head and said, "It looks like it's getting hot up there. It can't be helped. The die is already cast." She took out her weapon, pointed it at Reika and asked, "Is it time for them to begin too?" Reika took a stance, preparing for battle. Just before that, the MC said, "Reika." She appeared in front of him and dropping to one knee asked, "Did he call her?" He answered, "He took her with him because she wanted to help no matter what. So he will give her a task. First, he will take care of the middle floors. He needs her to take on the lower floors where the awakened are kept. Perhaps she will have to face A rank awakened there. She must remember one thing. She only has one priority." At that moment, Elena raised her hand to strike and said, she doesn't feel any killing intent from her. Hadn't she hidden herself so boldly just to catch her? Reika drew her blades and swung her weapons, attacking her opponent. Elena thought she knew it, given that Reika looks like an assassin. Was she planning to attack from the shadows? But she doesn't feel her presence, not even her gaze. She looked away and thought, so that means, then she asked, she didn't really come here to catch her, right? Meanwhile, in the room, burnt wasps lay on the floor. Ricardo rushed forward and shouted, "Damn, who would have thought that idiot from the administration was even capable of controlling monsters?" Edgar ran ahead and said, "They're leaving right now. He must tell Elena to deliver the capsule to the collection point." Ricardo ran alongside and asked, "What about Omega? What did he think they were causing all this chaos for?" He turned and glared at him. The next moment, he grabbed Ricardo by the neck with one jerk and pinned him against the wall. He said, he probably didn't see, but Omega was with that guy from the administration. He thought, if he thinks he can break past him and grab her, he's asking for mercy. And even if he manages to get her back, will they have enough time and strength to escape after that? He answered, confused, no. Then he walked forward and said, in that case, he should shut up and contact Elena. Ricardo rubbed his neck and said, he's been trying to contact her for some time, but she's not responding at all. Edgar noticed, she's either deliberately ignoring them or she's dead. Then he grabbed the door handle and added, they still have time to get the capsule. They're heading underground. The group ran further down the corridor. Meanwhile, Reika cut the ropes on Jungmin's arms, and he said he hadn't seen her face before. Who was she? She replied, all he needed to know was that the assistant manager had sent her, and he should prepare to escape. They were coming. At that moment, she noticed a glow in the door. Elena entered the room after her and said, she was ignoring her, setting up this cute little trick, wanted to take them with her, right? But was she sure that was a good idea, with bombs around their necks? Jungmin said, unfortunately, those necklaces were gone. Elena was surprised. They really were gone. This complicates everything. No, they must make this simple. Judging by the way things were going, they would have to retreat anyway. She would just kill everyone before leaving. Her gaze turned wild, and she grabbed her weapon. Reika declared she would take charge of her. They must pick up the people in the corridor and get out of the building. One of the awakened ones said, there's only one of her. Won't they win if they all attack together? Elena appeared at his side in a flash, asking, does he really think so? She raised her hand to strike, but Reika managed to aim her weapon, parrying Elena's attack. She smirked. Finally, she's feeling the killing intent, huh? Reika frowned at her, and then they continued their brutal battle. Those present shouted, he can't even see them. Reika said, Jongmin should handle the hostage evacuation. The assistant manager from Seoul has messages for him. One of the people present said, that crazy idiot always looks for him at times like this. Then he looked at the hostages and barked, everyone, stand up. This isn't a battle they can interfere with, so they should just do as they're told and get out of here. The crowd ran for the exit. Elena looked at them and shouted, who gave them permission to move? At the same moment, Reika asked, who gave her permission to look away? Elena spun around, parrying Reika's attack, but she kicked off the ground, flew overhead, and grazed Elena's face with her foot. Elena took a step to the side and shouted indignantly, how dare she use such cheap tricks? She struck Reika in the stomach and threw her against the wall. Reika rose up, inhaling loudly, and Elena muttered, she would not only drain her abilities but also suck out her bone marrow before killing her. Reika replied, she would gladly watch this to the end with her, but her job ends here. Elena asked in confusion. What? Reika explained. If she was also an assassin, she should hear it. The hostages had just escaped the building. Elena snapped. So what? Reika firmly stated. Her top priority was evacuating the hostages. The master decided to personally handle her punishment. At that moment, MC placed his hand on the floor, concentrated his energy, and asked, now perhaps we should evaluate the new labyrinth? The system reported, activating the ghost labyrinth. The next second, everything beneath Elena's feet glowed with a bright light. She covered her face with her hand and asked, what is this? A moment later, she found herself in another dimension. Ricardo stood nearby and asked, is she alive? Elena looked at him in surprise and asked, what is he talking about? And most importantly, where are they? Edgar answered, they are inside that guy's ability. Elena asked again, inside the ability? He confirmed, yes, it is a labyrinth.